print it?
I think she just prints one for.
But did she print it? Did you see it?
Who knows all about the No, he started it. He started it. Yeah, but he just does. Oh, I didn't even see the dog.
Oh yeah. He's her. That's a cutie pie.
Oh, he's so.
He is cute. And you're not supposed to touch service dogs, right?
No, it's so hard.
I know, especially because they're so sweet.
Look at his face. Oh my
Did you do?
goodness.
I don't think I put the mayor's script in there either.
I did.
Oh, you know I was stressing, right?
Yes. No, I was like, shoot, did I do that?
Yeah.
What is happening? Why are there?
Right.
Okay, I told her to take.
So I guess I'm gonna start the meeting, or did you already start it?
I haven't started.
All right, I'm gonna start it. Well, it looks like it says resend the meeting, and then all it says is pause. So somebody must have started, because all I see is finish. Nick, did you start the meeting? Okay. I'm like, wait a
Does
minute.
it have the mayor's script in it?
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Thursday, October 17th, 2024 regular meeting of the Boulder City Council. Let's go ahead and get us started. I am going to call us to order, so I'll gavel us in again and ask if we can do a roll call, please, Elisha.
Yes, sir. Thank you, and good evening, everyone. We'll start tonight's roll call as usual with Councilmember Adams.
Present.
Councilmember Benjamin is absent. Mayor Brockett.
Present.
Councilmember Folkers.
Present.
Marquis.
Present.
Shuhart.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Spear.
Present.
Councilmember Wallach.
Virtually present.
Thank you, sir. And Councilmember Weiner.
Present.
Mayor, we have our quorum.
Thanks so much. All right, we're going to start tonight with item 1A, which is a Colorado Companies to Watch Month declaration to be presented by Council Member Schuhart. Ryan.
Is this on? Okay. Good evening. I'm going to say a short statement to give you some background and then invite some folks to come talk with us. So, small businesses play an important role in the Boulder economy, and for the past several years, we have taken time to recognize local small businesses that are named Colorado Companies to Watch. Colorado Companies to Watch is a unique program that recognizes outstanding second stage companies, which are defined as small businesses with 6 to 99 employees that are past the startup stage, which have demonstrated success and strong potential for growth, exceptional entrepreneurial leadership, innovative products and processes, and economic impact, community enrichment, and a positive corporate culture. The program is unique in that it recognizes businesses in a wide variety of industries from across the state, and businesses may not receive the award more than once. Since the program began over a decade ago, 800 businesses have been recognized as Colorado Companies to Watch. Of those, nearly 20% were located in Boulder, reflecting the city's strength in innovation and entrepreneurship. Past Colorado Companies to Watch from Boulder include Batki Chai, Boulder Ice Cream, Chocolove, Cold Quanta, Doc Popcorn, Eco Products, Evol Foods, Justin's Nut Butter, Ozo Coffee, Pop Sockets, Purely Elizabeth, Scratch Labs, Sphero, Wallaroo Hat Company, many more. This year, we are recognizing 4 small, fast-growing businesses that were named 2024 Colorado Companies to Watch. I would like to invite representatives from one of them who can join us tonight to come forward now for a reading of a declaration recognizing their achievement. So I'd like to invite Lee Rosen, co-founder and CEO of Think Orbital, and Wojtek Holub, co-founder and chief innovation officer, up to the dais. Hello. I will now read the declaration. In 2009, the governor of Colorado initiated an annual Colorado Companies to Watch Award program to recognize second stage companies with high potential for future growth. Each year, for more than 1,000 nominations, only 50 small businesses in the state are selected for the award. Since the program began in 2009, 133 of the businesses named Colorado Companies to Watch have been from Boulder, reflecting the city's strength in innovation and entrepreneurship. In 2024, Colorado Companies to Watch honorees from Boulder include the Colorado Women's Center, NED, Talents to Team, and Think Orbital. These 4 Boulder businesses represent a wide range of industries and are among the most visionary, innovative, successful, and impactful entrepreneurs in the state. These businesses exemplify creativity, innovation, and entrepreneurial spirit and support the community with the jobs and economic opportunity they provide, expenditures they make, and local taxes they pay. The City Council of the City of Boulder, Colorado extends our gratitude for the many contributions these businesses make to the local community.
Yeah, you bet. Thank you so much. It's really an honor to be here. We really appreciate it. Being recognized as one of Colorado's companies to watch is truly an honor. We're a brand new business who received funding just a year ago and have already been into outer space. We are an in-space construction company, which kind of blows people's mind when you think about a small company in Boulder doing big things in outer space and building large infrastructure in outer space. And we had 15 full-time equivalent team members. Many of us came from all over the country and all over the world to be here in Boulder. We could have been anywhere, and we chose to come here, and we are appreciative of our great new city and our home. So thank you very much for having us, and we appreciate this honor.
Great. Thank you, Lee.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your service.
Thanks for that, Ryan, and thanks so much for joining us, Think Orbital folks. I had the chance to visit their facilities at a groundbreaking, and they really are doing space-breaking work. It's really extraordinary, the high caliber of engineering that's going on there in our very city. Okay, item number 1B is White Cane Awareness Day declaration presented by Council Member Weiner. And we also have representatives from the Boulder Valley chapter of the National Federation of the Blind. If you all would like to join Tara on the dais.
Actually, if she can come down here, Jim.
That, I like that even better. I like that even better.
We like it too. Great. Where would you like? Right here. Just here. Okay. All right, I'll start by reading the declaration. White Cane Awareness Day, October 17th, 2024. The white cane, which every blind resident of Boulder has the right to carry, demonstrates and symbolizes the ability to achieve a full and independent life and the capacity to work productively in competitive employment. The white cane, by allowing every blind person to move freely and safely from place to place, makes it possible for the blind to fully participate in and contribute to our society and to live the lives they want to live. Every community member should be aware that the law requires that motorists and cyclists exercise appropriate caution when approaching a blind person carrying a white cane. The City of Boulder calls upon employers, both public and private, to be aware of and utilize the employment skills of our blind citizens by recognizing their worth as individuals and their productive capacities. Boulder's commitment to equitable opportunities for blind community members includes making city programs, services, and activities accessible for people with disabilities and enforcing the city's human rights ordinance, which protects against discrimination in housing, employment, and public accommodation based on membership in a protected class. We, the City Council of the City of Boulder, Colorado, declare October 17th, 2024 as White Cane Awareness Day in Boulder, and do call upon our schools, colleges, and universities to support opportunities for training to blind persons, upon employers and the public to utilize the available skills of blind persons and to open new opportunities for the blind in our rapidly changing society, and upon all community members to recognize the white cane as a tool of independence for blind pedestrians on our streets and highways. Signed by Mayor Brockett. Would you guys like to, any of you want to speak? Yeah?
Sure. There you go. Thank you so much. I am Marianne Migliarelli, president of our National Federation of the Blind Boulder Valley chapter, accompanied by Jim Walcott and Jordan Castor, who are strong members of our organization. There are many blind people in Boulder, and all of us like to be on the streets, the sidewalks, and the multi-use paths in safe manner. There have been times where that has not been the case. And so we are here raising awareness that we are among you. We're not asking for more than common courtesy, but we are definitely asking for it. And the understanding that blind people in Boulder are alive and well and contributing members of this society, just looking for the same opportunities and courtesies that everyone else has. And in that vein, one of the projects that we spoke to the mayor about was access to the streets of Boulder. And so today we are passing along to Council Member Weiner our recommendations for a series of intersections in Boulder that we've noticed either need audible pedestrian signals, proper domes and or alignments, and other needs that meet those for the blind and other people with disabilities who live and work and otherwise visit Boulder. Thank you so much for your support, and I know you will work with us in collaborative fashion to make Boulder a wonderful place for all people to be. Can Boulder have it for a second?
My cane represents power, it represents confidence, it represents freedom, and I'm so proud to be a blind person and proud to live in Boulder, and I'm looking forward to working with you all to help make Boulder a more inclusive and accessible place. Thank you so much. This is really exciting.
It's a great opportunity and it's a great privilege to be here in front of you. Us three and plus a few others have done a lot of work to identify areas that are unsafe, need improvement, and with your help, and we'll give you the help too, we work together as a team to make this thing happen because we want to live here. I was born here, so I know I've been around a little bit about Boulder, but it takes everybody with a conscious courtesy to do everything together. And I thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Pass those among the council. We appreciate it. Thank you.
Good. Well, Marianne, Jordan, and Jim, thanks so much for being with us tonight and for those powerful words and for all of your work to make the city of Boulder accessible to blind folks and to everyone. And we are greatly appreciative for that list of intersections. We'll take a very close look at that, make sure our transportation department gets them, and see how we can improve those ASAP. Thanks again. All right. We are now going to go to open comment. And so, Elisha, if you could share out the public participation guidelines, please.
All right, thank you, sir. Thank you again, Mayor Brockett, and good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us. I will now review with you the public participation at City Council meeting guidelines. The city has engaged with community members to co-create a vision for productive, meaningful, and inclusive civic conversations. This vision supports physical and emotional safety for community members, staff, and council, as well as democracy for people of all ages, identities, lived experiences, and political perspectives. For more information about this vision and the community engagement processes, we ask that you please visit our website at bouldercolorado.gov/services/productive-atmospheres. Now, the following are examples of rules of decorum found in the Boulder Revised Code and other guidelines that support this vision. These will be upheld during the meeting. Participants are required to sign up to speak using the name they are commonly known by, and individuals must display their whole name before being allowed to speak online. Currently, only audio testimony is permitted online. Only one person at a time at the podium, unless an accommodation like an interpreter is required. All remarks and testimony shall be limited to matters related to city business. No standing in or otherwise blocking the aisles. No participant shall stand or hold items such as signs or flags in a manner that would block the view of another person. No participant shall make threats or use other forms of intimidation against any person. We ask that you not affix items to the podium or dais or walls or other surfaces of the chambers. Signs, flags, or other items used to communicate must be held by one person when displayed. Obscenity, other epithets based on race, gender, or religion, and other speech and behavior that disrupts or otherwise impedes the meeting will not be tolerated. And lastly, in-person participants are asked to refrain from expressing support or disagreement verbally or with sounds such as applause or snapping, with the exception of declarations. Again, thank you for joining us and thank you for listening.
Thanks so much for that, Alicia. All right, everyone will have 2 minutes to speak. I'll call 3 names at a time. If you can come on down to the front after your name is called to get ready, that would be greatly appreciated. And I am going to enforce that 2-minute time frame for all equally. So our first 3 speakers are Davis Martis, Patrick O'Rourke, and Martha McPherson. Can you turn on the microphone there, please?
There we go. Council members, thank you for your service. I'd like to offer perspective and ideas for engagement around the topic of vibrant neighborhoods. Though I wish the title did not imply that existing neighborhoods were not vibrant or family friendly, my neighborhood, I believe, is both. Collectively, the community survey delivered a statistically significant against the proposed changes, with some questions 2-to-1 not in favor, for instance, in regard to RL1 changes. Many concerns were cited in comments and generally in line with quality of life issues or the impacts on existing infrastructure. For instance, post the 2013 flood, I recall how important it is to have permeable soil to absorb rainfall. The proposed changes would reduce the amount of permeable land, potentially leading to greater risk of flooding. On the water supply side, the city has published research citing concerns around future supply due to climate change. We get 1/3 of our water supply from Windy Gap project and only hold junior rights. Increased density and expected climate change could exacerbate a shortage. One area that wasn't mentioned is our awesome hospital. I spoke to a senior member of BCH management and learned that our hospital operates in the high 80s in terms of percentage capacity. When that number gets to the low to mid 90s, sand is thrown into proverbial gears and quality of service serving patients can dramatically decrease. The 3 cities in the US with the highest density, New York, San Francisco, and Boston, are also the top 3 for highest average rents. So clearly, density is not a great path to affordability. If we ask the community a question, are you in favor of providing an increased level of affordability without densifying the city? I think the results would flip from 2-to-1 against to 3 or 4-to-1 in favor. As one of the most educated communities in the nation, we can collaborate and solve for this without significant and detrimental first and second order impacts that come from higher density. In conclusion, let's pause any significant changes and have a citywide conversation on where we want to go and how we want to get there. Thank you. I cede my 9 seconds to whoever would like it.
Thank you. Now we have Patrick O'Rourke, Martha McPherson, and Trish Emser.
Thank you. Am I on? Thank you. Thank you. Look before you, you'll see a notice I sent to the City Council last week, and thank you, Mayor Brockett, for responding to it. I just wanted to make the community aware that the National Park Service Advisory Board is going to be reviewing and discussing the possibility of having the Boulder County Courthouse nominated for a National Historic Landmark, which is its highest level of notification. So it has to do, and I'm going to try to read it from here, the Boulder County Courthouse is listed in the National Register of Historic Places as part of the Downtown Boulder Historic District, and in recognition of its role, the civil rights struggle of the lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer LGBTQ people. Here in 1975, Boulder County Clerk Clea Roex issued the first same-sex marriage licenses in the country, though Roex was directed to stop by County Attorney General. The 6 licenses she issued were never invalidated, foreshadowing the eventual legalization of same-sex marriage by the U.S. Supreme Court. So thank you, Mayor, if you'll have that letter or add it to the council. I'm a member of Historic Boulder, and I wanted to bring up 2 more things in my 32 seconds. Haystack Mountain was just sold. Boulder County Open Space Mountain Parks bought it. I think it's a fabulous opportunity to work with them when you're dealing with what's going on with the Poor Farm in the Chambers area, and I'd like to revisit that and somehow tie it in. Thank you for trying to get to meet the spirits this year. We had 950 people join us, and so that was in collaboration with with the Parks and Recreation. And then I'll save the rest for another time. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we have Martha McPherson, Trish Emser, and Kristen Marshall. If you can turn on the microphone there, please. There's a button. Thank you.
Yes, hi. I'm Martha McPherson. I appreciate this brief moment to voice my outrage at the casual response of the city council has to the genocide of an entire people, even infants and children. The destruction this country is facilitating with its dystopian love affair with Israel is one of the most inhumane events in human history. And how has the city council responded? With indifference and even hostilities to calls for a ceasefire from citizens who believe in peace for all people, not some people. How is it that we can send over $17 billion to Israel and then feel uneasy at the atrocities it commits every day? We feed Israel's demons and profit from their madness, at least those in the war-making business. The rest of us feel our social pillars crumbling through lack of support. A common response from the City Council is that its concerns extends to local matters only. The obvious reality is that the local and the universal are connected. Your indifference allows Israel to get away with genocide. Our local coffers are constantly drained by the military boondoggle. The refrain that Israel has a right to defend itself has been exposed for its inhumanity and cruelty by senseless killing of thousands. Israel is a rogue monster state, posturing as a victim of Arab aggression, ever contemptuous of international law, and failing in its surreal and untenable cries of victimhood. We have become a nation of easily manipulated minds. 30 million Christian Zionists welcome the
Your
destruction.
time is up, but thank you for your testimony. Now we have Trish Emser, Kristen Marshall, and Leslie Glustrom. It was already on. There you go. Oh, no, try again. There we are.
Thank you. Trish Emser here. Thank you for the time tonight. I trust you all received an email from me earlier today, which included statistics on bike theft in Boulder. I'm here tonight on behalf of a grassroots advocacy group named Bike Boulder. But drop the U, don't spell it that way. It's biking with more confidence, which is a term actually inspired by Ryan. Thank you. Our team's mission is to empower our community through more equitable bike safety, security, and recovery while promoting environmentally friendly transportation. We began about a year ago to reduce bike theft. Our mission was sparked by a few citizens who engaged with community cycles, Full Cycle, plus the Boulder and CU police departments. We got together and said, what can we do? People are apathetic. And I want you all to know that we very much appreciated the fact that you, Mr. Mayor, as well as several other city council members, have attended our Bike Theft Awareness Expo. We've had 2 of them this year. One of them was at Full Cycle, one at Community Cycles, and several of you even attended our booth in Bike Valet that we held at What's Up Boulder in September. We're most excited about the fact that the community is starting to really lean in and get interested on how to secure their bikes better and e-bikes while enjoying the fantastic paths that Boulder is famous for. So I do have a prop here. It's a Light Lock X1, $180, and during the demo that Dax tried to cut through it, this was the only lock that couldn't be defeated because it's a very high composition U-lock. So thieves are much better than they used to be, and we'll continue to educate. And so my question tonight is, will you please engage with us in an ongoing conversation so we can advocate?
Your time is up.
And thank you very much.
Thank you for your testimony. Okay, now we have Kristen Marshall, Leslie Glustrom, and Aaron Brooks.
Thank you. Thank you for your time. And I was also honored and humbled by the first people who showed this evening. My advisor in grad school was blind, and he was a lot smarter than I was. But in any case, 2 weeks ago, a woman stood here and expressed her concern about walking alone in Boulder after dark. I understand. I have worn out the soles of my shoes on our dark streets. I am also concerned that more lighting will mean more light pollution. Light pollution is a significant and growing threat to wildlife, including migratory birds. But there might be some good news. According to an October 9th article in the Camera, Boulder City has taken over thousands of streetlights from Excel to switch over to LEDs. This article implied that Boulder will be able to increase the reliability of lighting along pedestrian pathways while decreasing light pollution. Is this a tall order? Just look higher. Look at the birds flying over our heads. Birds don't wear shoes, but they got soul. I now yield the remainder of my time to silence. Silence for the children who die in war. Those without a voice tell us the story. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we have Leslie Glustrom, Aaron Brooks, and Alan Henry.
Good evening, Council. My name is Leslie Glustrom. I live in Boulder. Many of you know I've spent a long time working at the Public Utilities Commission as a citizen advocate. And so here we are with the famous graph. Blue line is Excel sales, last 20 years, basically flat. Red line are their profits. Gray line is what would have happened with their profits if they'd gone up at the rate of inflation. With 20 years of experience, I have a lot to say, and I'm working on a PUC filing right now where Excel's trying to game the system again. I've just spent 18 months and we finally got them on the performance incentive mechanism, waiting for the PUC decision. Now they're violating the law that Senator Fenberg helped pass on discount rate. Discount rate's really important because if you discount future fuel costs, you make them look really small. And if you're deciding whether you're going to do fuel-free resources or fossil fuel resources, if you discount them heavily, you make those fossil fuel costs look really small. We pay this much, they model this much. We've been working on this since 2008. And I'm just trying to give you some sense of what it's like to be down there. And obviously price is important from an equity and an affordability point of view. And it's also really important from an emissions point of view. We can't expect people to electrify if Excel's going to buy wind, solar, and storage for under 4 cents a kilowatt hour and sell it to us for well above 13 cents a kilowatt hour. That's why that red line keeps going up. You give me 20 years, I'll repeat all the 20 years of experience I have. But in 2 minutes, I'm just trying to give you a sense of why we have to take a very hard look at this monopoly. Just like we are looking at the Kroger and Safeway potential merger. I get it. We shouldn't probably allow that. But it's actually nowhere near the monopoly that Excel has. So the question becomes, can a better deal be gotten? And the answer is absolutely. Unless you're a community like Boulder that's served by Excel or the communities that are served by Black Hills. Those communities all over Colorado have much better deals. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we have Aaron Brooks, Alan Henry, and David Ensign.
First of all, before I start, I just want to say also, I'm so proud to live in Boulder. This was amazing today, so thank you so much for doing that. It means so much. Good evening. This evening, I would like to respectfully address Councilmember Adams. The council member has consistently, often several times a day, posted posts to her Instagram stories that are either unvetted and or harmful to some members of our community. It is important to note that Instagram stories disappear after 24 hours. For someone who I know cares about everyone, I'm sure she would not like to hear that these posts have been harmful to anybody in our community. This includes a particular post from Within Our Lifetime, which is an anti-Israel group that has been protesting all over New York City. This is a group that carries Hamas and Hezbollah flags in their protests. This post called to quote unquote flood New York City for Palestine on October 7th, which was the 1 year anniversary of the worst massacre of Jews since the Holocaust, something we all know about, and a day where Americans were also killed and taken hostage. Hamas refers to this day as the quote unquote Al-Aqsa flood, which was obviously a clear reference to October 7th. Amongst other things they have published manuals encouraging anti-Israels to quote unquote learn how to build effective barricades and what type of expanding foam works best on the kind of doorknobs present in our universities, end quote. I certainly don't think it is appropriate for a public official to encourage these types of actions, particularly on a day like October 7th. Unlike some who come to speak at these meetings, I will not make demands, and of course, I will not call you any names because that makes no sense. I am respectfully asking, and we are respectfully asking for these posts to stop. No one is forced into a public-facing role, and we all respect all of the work that you all do, but those who choose to serve must do so thoughtfully and with respect and consideration for the community they serve. And that means everyone in the community, and not just those with whom they personally agree. Again, please take these comments as intended, and with all due respect, thanks so much.
All right, thank you. Now we have Alan Henry, David Ensign, and Lisa Spalding. Is Alan Henry here? Not seeing Alan Henry, so we'll go to David Ensign.
Good evening, City Council members. I'm David Ensign, and I live at 4020 Evans Drive in Boulder. I'm a member of Better Boulder, a group of diverse and energetic community members who advocate for sustainable and smart development in this beautiful city. Our group sent this letter to you on September 9th, voicing support for the family-friendly Vibrant Neighborhoods work that Carl Geiler and staff will be presenting later tonight. I'm here to briefly speak about this position on behalf of Better Boulder. Better Boulder members are pleased by how well the proposal land use policies align with Better Boulder's mission of fostering vibrant, livable, sustainable, and connected communities. The original motivation for this effort was zoning for affordability, a goal that we think these changes will help achieve. But we also see progress here in moving towards true 15-minute neighborhoods that offer essential services for daily living that are accessible through means other than cars. The changes proposed here will be foundational for working on a robust middle-income housing strategy. Boulder's inclusionary housing program does much to create opportunities for those households who are under 60% of area median income. Encouraging modest housing types will help target those important community members making up to 120% of AMI who struggle to make ends meet in our expensive city. Timing of this project is good from a BVCP perspective because it can inform the next revision which is underway and also aligned with addressing affordability legislation being passed at the State House. As is the case with any residential zoning initiatives, residents may be alarmed if they feel there could be massive and rapid changes in their neighborhoods. I hope the public can understand that the expected rate of change is gradual. Boulder's experience with relaxing ADU restrictions, for instance, has led to a measured rate of change, as numerous factors influence residents' decisions to reconfigure their living spaces. Better Boulder provides more detailed comments on tonight's proposal in our letter, as well as some recommendations for future efforts. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Now we have Lisa Spalding, Angel Davis, and Lynn Sequel.
Lisa Spalding, speaking for Plan Boulder County. Any fair evaluation of family-friendly, vibrant neighborhoods must begin with a review of its goals. The proposal before you this evening increases the number and type of housing units in order to reduce housing costs. However, there is no proof that simply adding more housing will reduce the cost in college towns with a limitless demand for housing from both students and non-students. The changes to zoning in the 5 categories included in the current proposal do not take into consideration the value of the land in each zone, the effects on individual neighborhoods within each zone, and the opposition by up to 60% of respondents to the proposed changes in old established neighborhoods. The recent approval of 45 300 square foot units, each renting for about $2,500, only proves that smaller is not cheaper and that no one will voluntarily supply a variety of family-friendly missing middle housing. We need regulated development, not a free market that continues to squeeze out families. Above and beyond the immediate goals of creating more diverse and affordable housing, the increase in density must be sustainable. How will we expand Boulder's public transportation system? How will we cope with our diminishing water resources and extreme fire hazards? How will we preserve our valuable open space ecosystems from recreational overuse? We appreciate the huge effort staff has put into meeting City Council's demands, but do not want it wasted on ideologically driven concepts like eliminating established neighborhoods without any guarantee of affordability. Before moving forward with family-friendly, vibrant neighborhoods, we as a community must use the Boulder Valley Comprehensive Plan update to develop policies that will ensure success. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we have Angel Davis, and then Lynn Siegel will be testifying virtually, and then Michelle Rodriguez will be our next in-person testifier.
Good evening, City Council members. My name is Angel Davis, and I'm a graduate student in the Masters of the Environment program at CU Boulder. After graduation, I plan to pursue a career in urban planning law to advocate for and create sustainable, permanent, supportive housing for the unhoused. I know that the city recently opened Bluebird Apartments, so I commend you for proposing the other affordable housing developments on the agenda tonight because Boulder is in dire need of housing. As someone who volunteers with my church, Second Baptist Church, on Tuesdays in Boulder Creek Park, I know there is a large unhoused population, and many of them desire housing. I know that there are NIMBYs who don't want the unhoused near them, even in permanent supportive housing. However, we are all one decision or life circumstance from being unhoused. Therefore, I would like to know that in addition to the development income housing like the Diagonal Plaza and the Alpine Balsam redevelopments and the Raleigh Flats low income housing, does the city plan to incorporate more permanent supportive housing into future mixed income developments and construct more permanent supportive housing with wraparound services for the unhoused? Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Now we have Michelle Rodriguez and then Rob Smoke, and then we'll go to our virtual speakers.
Hi guys, you all know who I am. Anyway, I wanted to speak on something I just realized was going on, and this is something that was posted on the dailymuck.com. This was in regards to Darren O'Connor releasing parts of the recording that he so unlawfully recorded, I guess to try and prove that he was being integral, but it goes, from Cowboy Buff to Darren O'Connor, lawyer knowingly records meeting he signed NDA for. Darren O'Connor says, nice try, but I didn't even know the meeting was recorded. Keep assuming, smarty pants. Michael Burt says, you're going to destroy Boulder NAACP just like you destroyed Feet Forward. You are a corrosive and negative force in Boulder, especially for the people you claim to advocate for. I can't express this enough. And that several times, even though I relate as a person of color, whatever color that be, peach, purple, that I felt violated and like I was being racially discriminated against from NAACP. And it was under the guise of Darren O'Connor. There were several times I tried to post on there regarding my issue with my lawsuit and things. He claimed his success in winning that lawsuit for Sammy Lawrence, and they even had their little documentary on the anniversary of my incident. They removed my picture of me standing next to Sammy Lawrence from NAACP. They took my badges away because what my statement didn't lift people of color. Same thing, and I kind of felt, and I do appreciate your explanation as to what the community coordinator said the other day when I tried to define what I thought people of color was, and that I felt like it was kind of oppressive, his statement.
Thank you. All right, last in-person speaker is Rob Smoke.
Good evening. My name is Rob Smoke. I've lived in Boulder more or less since 1986. Um, sometimes it feels like I still just got here. Um, the issues happening with Gaza right now are just really unspeakable based on all the authenticated news that's available. I mean, it's clear to the humanitarian and human rights organizations of the world that genocide is occurring, that people are being slaughtered, that mass murder is simply the norm. And for people not to speak out about it here when, you know, our weapons are being used, you know, and our tax money is going to this, it's just, well, it just causes a kind of moral injury. And collectively, when we read about some, you know, some college students, there's just a story about CU and pro-pal protesters at CU being sanctioned. And the problem is that, you know, that moral injury, it really is a significant, it signifies a kind of violation of the basic core values people have as humans against things like mass murder or murder of any kind. And, you know, I just have to say that I still think it's unacceptable. This council constantly issues declarations in support of things like Indigenous Peoples Day, etc. But this is the reality of what's happening right now, and in all those cases, the people behind them, behind that, would want support for measures in support of
Thank you.
Palestine. Thank you.
All right, our first three online speakers are R.M. Bingham, Adeline Marquez, and James Evans.
Hello.
We can hear you.
Okay, thank you. So I am back again today with a very simple request, which is mainly that those of you that have not responded yet to my repeated emails, respond to my emails. That is at least 7 of the city council. I guess I haven't yet emailed the city manager, but I would also like a response from the city manager on this issue because her name is on the report that I've been waving in your faces, wherein it states the city's socially responsible investing policy. It says that the city does not invest in companies that produce weapons not used in national defense. And yet, at last, most current information that is available from Q2 shows that the city still holds $5.5 million in corporate bonds from Caterpillar Incorporated. I've sent all of the council numerous links showing the ways in which the armored bulldozers, complete with machine gun turrets and other weaponized improvements, are being used in illegal military occupation and invasion in West Bank, in Gaza, and most recently today, there was an incident where a bulldozer was used to destroy a wall defending that was part of the bunker or defenses of the UN peacekeeping forces in southern Lebanon. It's UNIFIL. So I think it's all become clear over the past year how just Israel is using all of the weapons at its disposal to commit war crime after war crime in direct flagrancy and violation of all international norms and human rights. And it's clear that it doesn't matter as long as the US is supporting them. So the city just needs to do the minimum, the bare, least possible thing they could do to at least not have the city be profiting from these weapons of war. And I would like your thoughts on this matter from those I haven't heard from.
Thank you. Now we have Adeline Marquez, James Evans, and Daniel Howard.
I do not see Adeline online, but I do have some other names. Adeline, if you're here, please let me know by using the raise hand function or reaching out in the Q&A box.
Thanks. In the meantime, we'll move to James Evans.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Awesome.
Okay, good evening, members of the Boulder City Council. My name is James Evans, or as I'm commonly referred to in the community, Radagast the Black, and I have been a permanent resident of Boulder for 2 years, though I've spent many summers here before that. I'm here to address the crucial issue of homelessness, something I live with firsthand. The Boulder Shelter for the Homeless does not have enough beds to meet the needs of many individuals seeking refuge. As someone with limited mobility and a disability, I'm expected to pack up my belongings regularly, which is simply not feasible. I am facing double hip replacement surgery, and the physical strain of breaking down my camp takes a heavy toll. The policies currently in place do not just affect me, they criminalize homelessness across our community. I've witnessed how these laws, along with the lack of adequate services, are deteriorating the mental and physical health of many of my fellow homeless individuals. In addition, Miss Zariah, that was brutally murdered, she was homeless, and there was just not enough services for her. Despite only being a permanent resident for 2 years, I've seen how the well-being of some of the long-term homeless has spiraled down. For a city that prides itself on compassion and community, it's devastating to see how little value is placed on our most vulnerable. We need immediate actions, but real solutions like sanctioned camping and improvements to the shelter system. My group and I are more than willing to collaborate with you. We have years of lived experience, both here and other places, navigating homelessness. Our insights can help make a sanctioned camping area or tiny home community work, and we want to work with you to find humane solutions. Criminalizing homelessness is not the answer. Providing support and tangible resources is. Boulder can do better.
Thank you. Now we have Daniel Howard, Laura Gonzalez, and then Pali Fuster Aguilera.
Hi, this is Daniel Howard. I'm calling in to speak about the family-friendly neighborhood initiative to be speaking on later. I'm generally supportive of these initiatives, at least in terms of providing more housing options to our community by increasing ability for homeowners and developers to increase housing options and build new types of dwelling units in different parts of our town. However, I have one main issue with item number 4 within that list in terms of owner occupancy requirements that asks to enact an ordinance towards requiring owner occupancy requirements for additional units in the RR1, 2, and RL1 zoning districts. I do not believe that is a equitable and fair solution towards addressing affordable housing holistically towards all people in our community. As a renter in Boulder, this type of initiative to only allow owner occupancy does not serve our interests. If the intention instead is to police owner occupancy, so to speak, in order to address sustainability and neighborhood character or other sort of issues in regards to why that provision might be enacted, I believe there are alternatives in place to achieve that same goal. There's a pretty relatively extensive report already done by Brookings Institute about impacts of owner occupancy requirements on housing access equity and housing affordability, and I encourage you to seek that out if you're interested. Some main points to take away from that particular document just include the how these efforts, have several negative impacts on equity efforts to build multifamily housing, as well as negative externalities on overall housing supply. Typically, renters have lower incomes than homeowners and are racially more diverse, and have owner occupancy requirements affect the economic and demographic makeup of neighborhoods. By enforcing those owner occupancy requirements, you're basically limiting renters such as myself and my peers to be able to enter into the neighborhoods across Boulder. The additional solutions in that space other cities have enacted that might meet our
Your
terms of.
time is up, but thank you for your testimony. And our final 3 speakers are Laura Gonzalez, Pali Fuster Aguilera, and Lynn Siegel.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so I am here as I am overweight, not to try to even convince you anymore to pass a ceasefire resolution, which is long overdue, and also to end the occupation of Israel, but just honestly to put it on the record so your children and grandchildren are able to see these videos and know where you stood in the current Holocaust that the state of Israel is doing with the tax dollars of our city, 1.6 million tax dollars. Last weekend, Shaban Al-Dalu, a 19-year-old engineering student, got murdered, still connected to his IV. She was burned alive. And she was burned alive with the bombs of the United States and with the $1.6 million that you guys invested. I'm also very upset to hear that you guys are investing in Caterpillar. Caterpillar. Have you ever been to the West Bank? If you have never been to the West Bank, you should go and you should learn and you should witness what occupation is. I have been to the West Bank. I have witnessed the demolition of homes for the Caterpillar bulldozers. Shame on every single one of you, except Taisha. Other than that, shame on every single one of you. Also, I am actually not just suggesting, I am demanding that you stop investing or tax dollars, city and county dollars, that you guys invest in the Jewish Community Center. The Jewish Community Center is a Zionist institution. They pass donations, they have a nonprofit status, which we should remove because they send donations to the Friends of the IRA. They send donations to an occupying force. That is illegal in the West Bank. So you need to stop using your tax dollars to rent space there because I know you spend at least $4,000 for 8 hours. And also, you need to tell public health to stop censoring their employees from wearing kufiyas and having watermelon stickers. I don't know if you knew that, but Boulder County Public Health, the one institution that should be demanding that there is a polio epidemic, that occupation, it's illegal.
Your time is up, but thank you for your testimony. And now we have Paddy Fuster Aguilera and Lynn Siegel.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, my name is Dr. Paddy Fuster Aguilera. I live and work in Boulder. You keep saying that asking for a ceasefire is not a local issue, but you know very well that this is not true. We have been giving you many reasons on why this is indeed a local issue, and I cannot comprehend how you can go ahead with your life with the atrocious genocide that is being broadcasted, and we can see every day how the lives of the indigenous peoples of Palestine and are dismissed every single day. I work at the University of Colorado. Last semester, Linda Sarsour, a Palestinian American activist, came to give a very inspirational speech at CU Boulder. A small group of Zionist students tried to stop her from coming to speak because they did not feel safe with her being on campus. We are at the point that Palestinian voices are threatening. This should sound familiar to you on how like Black and brown voices are labeled as such. The Board of Regents of the University of Colorado just recently condemned the word intifada, which literally means shake it off in Arabic, and it refers to the uprising of the oppressed people. I keep educating myself, I keep reading, but the world seems to not want to do that. You all seem not to want to do that. Because of your silence, 2 students on October 3rd from CU Boulder were righteously using their First Amendment right, protesting outside of the Lockheed Martin career fair at CU, have been banned from the university. Yes, our university invests in weapons that are used to do an ethnic cleansing of Palestinian people. And the city so too. Please address the Caterpillar issue that many people at Open Common are bringing up. These students were banned because the attendees at this fair claimed that they did not feel safe by their presence. We know this argument, like please do something. This is only gonna get worse. Free Palestine, and from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. Free Palestine.
Thank you. Our final speaker is Lynn Siegel.
Free Palestine. You know what Netanyahu said this week? Because he was being accused of attacking the UN and UNIFIL in Lebanon. He said, it's exactly the opposite. I'm saving them from harm's way. Yet, of course, he's the one who's producing the harm. Can you believe the logic of this person? Seriously. We need to municipalize from Xcel Energy in 2025. I want to know who owns the airport. I guess we own the airport, but how do we own the airport? I've talked to you in many emails. I have never gotten an answer. Do we have, our investment now? We're spending a pile of cash on an FAA lawsuit about what the word perpetuity means. They have these rights, and we're spending my tax dollar this way. And we actually own the airport? I mean, we're not getting the grants now so that we can kind of unown it. What the heck? How does this work? I want to understand it. I really do. And I've asked you and you don't say. Let's see. Redfern, I don't feel safe in Boulder. He changed the dispatch code. He told me that was the only way that he could get evidence. You know what happened? Phil Weiser didn't want another George Floyd, so he got Redfern the job in Boulder in exchange for testifying. Don't do that to me, Mark. For testifying against his fellow workers. This is unacceptable. I don't feel safe in Boulder. Done.
Thank you. All right, that brings open comment to a close. I want to thank everybody for coming out and speaking to us tonight and sharing your thoughts. I'll turn to city staff to see if there are any responses.
Thank you so much, Mayor. Just a few things, and as always, thank you everyone for coming out and sharing their thoughts. I wanted to share that there is staff currently working on a support letter for the national landmark of the courthouse, so know that that is happening. I did want to say to Trish, let me make sure I have the name right, from Bike Boulder, I shared your letter with our interim director of transportation and mobility, and she would be very much happy to meet with you. I know that you've been meeting with our police department, but our transportation mobility staff would be very much interested in that continued partnership. And to Angel, I don't know if you have an interest, but I know that we are continuing to build more permanent supportive housing in the city. And if you have that interest, I'd be very happy to connect you with our Housing and Human Services staff. They do such amazing work in that area. And if you're interested to learn more, I can reach out to you and get that connection. That is all, Mayor.
Thanks. Teresa?
Nothing from me, Mayor. Thank you.
Great. I'll check to see if any council members have anything. Actually, I was going to ask something, but Neri, you covered both of the things I was going to ask about, so thanks for that. Anybody? Lauren?
I guess I just wanted to add to the permanent supportive housing conversation that not only are we working to continue to support that in our community, but also through our regional homelessness, through the county's regional homelessness group, we're also working to advocate for that beyond city boundaries as well.
Very good. Anybody else? Yep. And then Ryan, you as well? Okay, so after Taisha.
Awesome, thank you. I have 3 items. The first is somebody made reference to the community survey, and I just wanted to again lift up the limits to that survey and my initial concern around referencing that survey because of some of the inequitable I don't know, just lack of reliability and validity as it relates to racially and ethnically diverse people who are chronically underrepresented in that survey, as well as, I think there were opportunities to increase renter responses as well. So just a general comment on it is essential that that survey is as equitably administered and designed as possible because people reference it for everything. So just wanted to lift that up and ask when the next survey is going to be administered so that we can ensure that there is sufficient representation and that it is not European American homeowners over here and racially and ethnically diverse people over there with the community connectors, which is currently how I had been told. Remember in our conversation before that, oh, no, don't worry, community connectors have been talking with racially and ethnically diverse community members, and they have a report over there. So I just want to lift that up as something I'm hopeful that we can revisit. On another issue, I wanted to lift up the hospital piece, and not so much from the concern around our topic today, but more so just I noticed as a stakeholder group, that's not necessarily one that we have engaged with as as a council. And when I busted my face a couple of months ago, they had indicated that they had seen an uptick in e-bike and e-scooter injuries. And so I was just curious if there were opportunities for our council to connect or meet with some of the hospital leadership. Again, just to determine if there's any trends or anything that would impact the work that we're doing here in our community. Just a general question. And then lastly, thank you for, again, those who are coming to speak on the request for a ceasefire and council movement on that. I continue to advocate for that and want to clarify that any of the messages, and I post almost every single day about this issue. And again, just wanted to reiterate that please don't let anything distract from the next things I'm getting ready to say, which are I'm seeking an immediate ceasefire, self-determination for all, and the end of any kind of apartheid policies, and an arms embargo until U.S. laws are properly followed. Just like we have policing and rules here, those should be applied everywhere. I also believe we just went through we're in the budgeting process, and it's crystal clear that the drying up of the ARPA funds, when they say ARPA funds, P.S., that's federal funds, and those are drying up. And you see that in the reduction of the county's efforts around health and human services and the work that we are trying to do here in our city. So it is disingenuous to say that there is no connection between federal and local. So I will continue to use my personal platforms to lift that up and call for those things, and hopeful that the majority of our council has a willingness to act collectively, and also want to urge us all to contact our Colorado senators who have the votes to be able to block an arms embargo. I also invite anyone who's interested to join us at the Boulder Nabla Sister City Project, where we have direct relationships with Palestinian people who are trying to preserve land, language, their past, their present, and their future. You're welcome to email me at adamst@bouldercolorado.gov for more information on ways that you could participate. And then lastly, as a member of the NAACP of Boulder County, I was very excited about the mediation that was to take place. It has been disappointing to see the breach in confidentiality, and yet I am hopeful for a future where our staff and leadership and council at the city have meaningful relationships and a collaborative spirit with the NAACP of Boulder County, grounded in mutual respect and understanding. Thank you.
Thanks, Taisha. Ryan?
Thank you. Two things. First, I would like to acknowledge Aram Bingham. Aram, you requested that we pursue divestment in Caterpillar because of its role with the violence in and around Gaza. Forgive me if that's paraphrased. But in any case, I just want to give you my position. I'm not in favor of council taking action on this for similar reasons that I'm not in favor of taking action with other elements of the crisis. In short, given where the community is, I'm just not convinced that we have the resources, both the expertise and the bandwidth to do this well, and in a way that doesn't lead to new problems. And in the context that we are having to make serious trade-offs today, tonight, next week, with respect to having the resources to resolve immediate local direct problems, including sufficient and available housing and that's affordable, homelessness, and a lot of other issues. I'm sorry not to give you a more affirmative answer, but I do think it's a fair question, and I wanted to acknowledge it and thank you for keeping us apprised. Second item, I wanted to acknowledge both Trish Emser and Leslie Glustrom, both for coming and talking both about the critical issue of bike parking, which I think is a lot more important than people might intuitively think it is for a lot of reasons regarding our actual mobility options, our climate action, accessibility, and a number of other things. And I look forward to there's a number of proceedings we have coming up, including thinking about developing our next demand management set of policies and our climate update. And I think you both of those perspectives have an important role to play, and I look forward to picking up with you all there. Thanks.
Thanks. That's right. I think that's it. I didn't see any other. Oh, Tara.
Nuria, in regards to what you wanted to say to Trish Emser, she wasn't in the room at the time, so, right? Trish, you still here? Right, so if you could maybe write to her or tell me and I'll tell her or something like that.
I'd be happy to.
Thank you.
Okay, great. And with that, we can now move to our consent agenda, please, Elisha.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Our consent agenda is item number 3 on.
Okay. Quiet in the room, please. Quiet in the room, please. Okay, quiet in the room, please. All right, Elisha.
Our consent agenda is item number 3 on tonight's agenda, and it consists of items 3A through 3J.
Anybody have any questions or comments on the consent agenda? Or a motion? Quiet tonight.
I will move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
We've got a motion and a second. Can we do a roll call, please, Elisha?
Yes, sir. Thank you. We'll start to roll call for the consent agenda items 3A through 3J with Councilmember Marquis.
Yes.
Shuhart.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Spear.
Yes.
Councilmember Wallach.
Yes.
Weiner.
Yes.
Adams.
Yes.
Mayor Brockett.
Yes.
And Councilmember Folkerts.
Yes.
The consent agenda items 3A through 3J are hereby approved unanimously.
Thanks so much. If you can take us to our first call-up check-in, please.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Our call-up check-ins are item number 4 on tonight's agenda. 4A is the call-up consideration for the following items related to the proposed Alpine Balsam redevelopment project at 1100 Balsam Avenue and 1155 Alpine Avenue. First item to be considered is the form-based code review for site and infrastructure improvements for the form-based code area generally located at 1100 Balsam Avenue and redevelopment of the site with 217 new housing units split between 7 buildings with a total of 157 permanently affordable units and 60 market rate units, as well as 2,100 square feet of new commercial space. This is reviewed under case numbers LUR 2023-00034, LUR 2023-00042, and LUR 2024-00017. These applications include a request for an amendment to the Alpine Balsam Area Plan Connections Plan to relocate a mobility hub from the west side of the 9th Alpine Connector Street on the southwest corner of site to the east side of the street and to allow for 11th Street to be a private drive instead of a public street. The second item to be reviewed under this call-up is the site review and use review application to amend Boulder Community Hospital PUD, that's referenced LUR 2023-00015, generally located at 1155 Alpine Avenue and 2655 Broadway, to allow for renovations and a 4th-story addition to the existing pavilion building and renovation of the city parking garage, including a request for height modification to allow for building heights of 55 feet. This application also seeks to extend the PUD to include the properties located at 1125 and 1136 North Street and 1136 Alpine Avenue. The use review is to allow a principal parking facility use at 2655 Broadway as proposed on the ground floor in the BC-2 zoning district along the parking structure's Broadway frontage, proposed to replace existing commercial space. And again, it is referenced under LUR 2023-00053.
Thanks for getting all the way through that, Elisha. And if anyone in the audience thought that was long, you should look at the packet for this item. Any questions or comments or desire to call this item up? check on Mark here. All right, I don't see anybody's hand raised. So I'll just call on myself. I don't have a desire to see this called up, but I would like to call out this milestone. This project has been underway since 2015, and it's really exciting to see us get to this point where we have an actual site plan and form-based code for so much affordable housing, as well as some much-needed market rate housing as well, and a new home for city offices also. So huge thanks to I think it's dozens of staff members who have been working on this for as much as a decade, and really exciting to see us hit this major milestone and looking forward to the work to come. And with that, if we could go to our other call-up item, please.
Yes, sir. And this one's not as long, so thank you for listening, everyone. Item 4B on tonight's agenda is the call-up consideration of the following items. The first item is the site review approval for the redevelopment of a 2.33 acre site, including the properties generally known as 2504, 2506, 2536, and 2546 Spruce Street, 2055 26th Street, and 2537 Pearl Street, with 52 residential units and 10 new 4-story buildings up to 49 feet 7 inches in height. The project provides 97 parking spaces where 129 spaces are required. This is a 25% parking reduction. It is reviewed under case number LUR 2024-00020. The second item to be considered is an amendment to the Boulder Valley Regional Center Transportation Connections Plan to remove of the east-west secondary street connection and the north-side multi-use path connection through the properties generally known as 2504, 2506, 2536, 2546 Spruce Street, 2055 26th Street, and 2537 Pearl Street.
Thank you. Any questions or comments or desire to call this one up? Tina?
Yeah, I just wanted to appreciate the thought that was put into this project by the person who designed it and also the comments from Planning Board. The only comment I would say, which would not change my opinion, would just to look at the connectivity of the development with the park that's across Folsom. That can be a great amenity for families. So just looking at how those can be just a logical place for people to spend time as we continue to hope to attract people with children. There are a lot of 3 and 4 bedroom units. I think it's exclusively those, and it will be exciting to see if it does bring some families into that central area.
Anybody else? I will just speak out again here and also do not have a desire to call this one up, but this project has taken a number of twists and turns. It's been a very complicated road. I think it's ended up in a good place. I appreciate the on-site affordable units, and congratulations to the designers on this and the site review approval and moving it forward. Looking forward to seeing some more housing in town. In a great spot for it. All right, and with that, we can go to our public hearing.
Yes, sir. Our public hearings are item number 5 on tonight's agenda. 5A is the consideration of the following items relating to the 2025 budget. We have first, second reading and consideration of a motion to adopt ordinance 8660, which is adopting a budget for the city of Boulder for the fiscal year commencing on the first day of January 2025. The next item to be considered is the second reading and consideration of a motion to adopt ordinance 8661, which is establishing the 2024 City of Boulder property mill levies, which are to be collected by the County of Boulder. The third item is the second reading and consideration of a motion to adopt ordinance 8662, which is appropriating money to defray expenses and liabilities of the City of Boulder. And the last item is item number 4, which is the second reading and consideration of a motion to adopt ordinance 8656, which is amending the sections listed, which is changing certain fees and taxes.
Thank you, Alicia, and what I believe may be the shortest presentation staff has ever made to council. We will go to a quick slide or two. I think it's just one on the budget. But before I send it over to Charlotte, I just once again want to thank council for their thoughtfulness. This whole budget season, you have challenged us with good questions. You have been thoughtful about your inquiries, and you have been so present in wanting to dive into the budget process and challenge us with what is, we know, a constrained budget. I hope at some point I will retire that phrase as we move forward and see better times, but have really been thoughtful about how we go about thinking about our priorities. So just want to again thank you. With that, Charlotte, send it to you.
Thanks, Nuria. Good evening, Council. Good to be here this evening. Charlotte Husky, Budget Officer for the city. I will be doing a very brief presentation, as Nuria mentioned, so just one slide to cover the overview of the 2025 recommended budget for second hearing this evening. So our 2025 budget, as Nuria mentioned, was one that was developed in a constrained environment. We shared earlier on in our financial forecast that this represents 1 year that we've identified flattening of and uncertainty of our citywide major revenue sources, including sales and use tax and property tax. So our budget direction for this year really focused on realignments toward prioritized program outcomes, utilizing our third year of budgeting for resilience and equity. With this, we were able to perform realignments of existing dollars towards prioritized program services. We utilized one-time funding that we found available to support one-time strategic investments in community priorities, citywide goals, and much needed underfunded city facility maintenance. We were able to identify and support key areas of the citywide strategic plan, such as supporting livability and safety efforts through investments in affordable housing, human services, and rental assistance funding, as well as the Urban Rangers program. We were also able to advance and uplift City Council priorities, such as the Boulder Valley Comprehensive Plan and the Economic Vitality Strategies. As we look ahead, we recognize that we have significant unfunded and underfunded needs. We have shared earlier in our forecast, in our financial forecast earlier this year, that we have limited ongoing funding availability and limited ongoing revenues. And so what this means is really pointing and looking to a long-term financial strategy, and we look forward to bringing this forward to City Council in 2025 and engaging the community and providing council updates in 2025 as well. So with that, I'll turn it over for council questions.
Okay, thanks so much, Charlotte. I think you did just set a record for the most concise and shortest presentation, so congratulations, appreciate that. And reasonable given the depth into which we have already gone into this at a study session in a previous public hearing, so thanks for being responsive to that. Any questions for city staff? I actually have one, which is we got an email from our Transportation Advisory Board as well as from Community Cycles asking about the reduction in Transportation Improvement Program Dr. Cog grant matching funds. And Charlotte, you wrote us an excellent email today kind of talking about why that's happening. I just wonder if we could highlight that on the dais here and at the meeting as well for the public's benefit.
Sure. Thank you for the question, Mayor Brockett. So we received our council members received a letter from the Transportation Advisory Board. We shared a note to city council members earlier this morning addressing the line item funding levels for the Transportation Improvement Program, or TIP funding levels, and help to clarify the reallocation of those dollars towards supporting transportation projects. Really, that line item is intended to support local match for grants, and so what we see in the 2025 budget is largely the majority of that funding is a reallocation of dollars towards supporting local match for Safe Streets for All, for example. One of the other other items that we pointed to in the council response this morning was that we are looking forward to incorporating this in our unfunded and underfunded needs and identifying funding levels and transportation maintenance is incorporated into that as well for the long-term financial strategy efforts that we're moving forward with in 2025.
Thanks so much for that, Charlotte. So to paraphrase, in the 2025 budget, we actually still are allocating a similar amount of money towards matching funds for grants for our Vision Zero and CAN program. It's just being matched against other grants, the federal grant rather than the TIP grants.
That's correct.
Great. Thanks so much. Any other questions? Seeing none. To check on Mark again. No, Mark doesn't have any either. Hi, Mark. Seeing no other questions, I'll go ahead and open the public hearing. We have one speaker. So Lynn Siegel, you have 3 minutes to speak.
I'm not speaking, but thank you.
Okay. Thanks for that. I will close the public hearing and bring it back to City Council for discussion or perhaps, and I can't say a motion because if you'll remember, I think we need 4 motions to get this done right. I'm looking over at Elish, who always keeps us honest. Yeah, Ryan.
Just a short comment. I also want to acknowledge that what we heard from Transportation Advisory Board, I agree with staff's perspective now, and I also just want to underline that I hear that one reason transportation funding can be so important is that we get match funding for it, sometimes 5x, I think maybe even more. So it's incredibly high value investment. That's one reason why. And to Nuria's point about our current constrained budget and maybe a future of a more liberated budget, I do think transportation is a prime candidate for innovation in the way we do financial strategies, and that is something we're this council is addressing over the next year. We began to address it and we'll do more of. So I look forward to discussions to come on how we can create more with less in the way that we value, price, spend, and understand how our financial flows work in the transportation system. So thanks everybody, and thank you again, staff.
Thanks, Ryan. If I could just colloquy with you on there, I appreciate you bringing that up. And I just wanted to thank our Transportation Advisory Board for raising this issue because, of course, we do want to make sure that we're leveraging our grant funding as much as we can. But I was glad to hear that we are, in fact, doing that. It's just going in a slightly different bucket, but to similar purposes. So I appreciate their advocacy and others in the community on this topic. I got Mark and then Tina.
At the risk, perhaps the certainty of being redundant, I want to thank the finance staff once again for their efforts in creating this budget, and in a climate of great difficulty and financial constraint. And I think they've done a fantastic job in making decisions that would be worthy of Solomon. This was not an easy budget to produce, and the choices were very, very difficult. And I think they did an excellent job, and I want to recognize them again. So thank you.
Appreciate that. Tina.
Yeah, I also just want to thank staff and also really appreciate the focus and discipline to fund our infrastructure. When we don't fund infrastructure, we get really expensive repairs really quickly. And I hope that this will be a continued theme so that we can enjoy things that we take for granted. Infrastructure doesn't necessarily land on the City Council top 10 priorities very often. It's not super exciting. But that's something that I think we should be particularly proud of as we take care of our city for the daily experience of the people who live here. So I appreciate that thing so much. Thanks.
Cool.
I was just going to make a motion. We're ready for that.
Yeah, Lauren, did you want to throw in a comment before we get a motion in? Sure. Yeah. Do you mind, Nicole?
Yeah, I just wanted to also appreciate staff for the difficult work that it took to get this budget to us. And I look forward to our moving forward with outcome-based budgeting and your creative ideas on how we get council involved earlier in the budgeting process next year. Thank you.
Thanks. Nicole, go for it.
One at a time, right? Okay. Motion to adopt ordinance 8660, adopting a budget for the city of Boulder, Colorado for the fiscal year commencing on the first day of January 2025 and ending on the last day of December 2025 and setting forth related details.
Second?
Got a motion and a second. We have a roll call, please.
Yes, sir. We'll start that roll call for ordinance 8660 with Councilmember Shuhart.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Spear.
Yes.
Councilmember Wallach.
Aye.
Weiner.
Yes.
Adams.
Yes.
Mayor Brockett.
Yes.
Councilmember Folkerts.
Yes.
And Marquis.
Yes.
Ordinance 8660 is hereby adopted unanimously.
All right, I'll keep rolling unless anybody else wants to do this. Motion to adopt ordinance 8661, establishing the 2024 City of Boulder property tax mill levies, which are to be collected by the County of Boulder, State of Colorado, within the City of Boulder in 2025 for payment of expenditures by the City of Boulder, County of Boulder, State of Colorado, and setting forth related details.
I'll second that. Do you mind just phrasing at the very beginning? I move that.
I move that.
Great, thank you. Got a motion and a second. Roll call, please, Alicia.
Yes, sir.
Oops.
The roll call for
H2.
ordinance 8661 will start with Mayor Pro Tem Spear.
Yes.
Councilmember Wallach.
Yes.
Weiner.
Yes.
Adams.
Yes.
Mayor Brockett.
Yes.
Councilmember Folkerts.
Yes.
Marquis.
Yes.
And Shuhart.
Yes.
Ordinance 8661 is hereby adopted unanimously.
I can do that. I move to adopt ordinance 8662, appropriating money to defray expenses and liabilities of the City of Boulder, Colorado for the 2025 fiscal year of the City of Boulder, commencing on the first day of January 2025 and ending on the last day of December 2025, and setting forth related details.
Second.
Motion and a second. Roll call, please, Alicia.
Yes, sir. The roll call for 8662. Or is it 8656?
8662, I believe.
That's what I thought. And I had a note. Anyway, thank you. Ordinance 8662 will begin with Councilmember Wallach.
Yes.
Weiner.
Yes.
Adams.
Yes.
Mayor Brockett.
Yes.
Councilmember Folkerts.
Yes.
Marquis.
Yes.
Shuhart.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Spear.
Yes.
Ordinance 8662 is hereby adopted unanimously.
And I move to adopt ordinance 8656, amending section 3-8-3, tax imposed on non-residential and residential development, section 3-20-2, imposition and rate of tax, and chapter 4-20, fees, BRC 1981, changing certain fees and taxes and setting forth related details.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Roll call, please, Alicia.
Yes, sir. This roll call for ordinance 8656 will start with Councilmember Weiner.
Yes.
Adams.
Yes.
Mayor Brockett.
Yes.
Councilmember Folkerts.
Yes.
Marquis.
Yes.
Shuhart.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Spear.
Yes.
And Councilmember Wallach.
Yes.
Ordinance 8656 is hereby adopted unanimously. Congratulations, team.
All right. Thanks so much to the finance and budgeting team. Really appreciate your extraordinary work on this budget, and to all the city staff, which is many, many, many of them, who contributed to the effort. Appreciate it very, very much. Okay, the last item on our agenda is our meatiest item, longest one. It's our matter item 8A. Alicia, if you could read that into the record, please.
Yes, sir. Our next item on tonight's agenda is item number 6, matters from the city manager. And that 6A is the update on family-friendly, vibrant neighborhoods council priority.
And just to confirm, I've got it as 8A, but it seems like it probably is 6A. You have 6A, okay. It's just my script. Okay, great, 6A.
Thank you, Mayor. And while we have had an evening of many firsts that have been short, I will say I wonder if this memo has put 5 questions to you as the opposite direction of many questions. But it is a council priority that we are excited to come forward with and get your feedback on. So with that, I will send it over to Brad with our family-friendly, vibrant neighborhoods presentation.
Thank you, Nuria. I'm happy to be here in a family-friendly, vibrant capacity for this evening. We are excited. I'm Brad Mueller, Director of Planning and Development Services, and we are indeed happy to bring forward this complex set of discussion points. I want to just preview before Carl does the presentation, and as he gets set up, the continuum really of looking at different ways we can fulfill some of the longer term goals that the city has had towards stabilizing, reinventing, reimagining neighborhoods, densifying in some cases, creating activity centers. This follows up on some of the work from the past in terms of zoning for affordability and really takes a next step towards looking at the neighborhoods even more holistically. And I do want to preview that this does provide a stepping stone to the comprehensive plan update, which I know we've talked about in the past as an important opportunity and milestone for additional conversations and additional analysis by staff, conversations with you, conversations with the community. So with that, Carl is almost ready. He's in the bullpen and ready to go. Thank you.
Thank you, Brad. Good evening, council members. I'm Carl Geiler, Planning and Development Services. Tonight, we're going to talk about the Family-Friendly Vibrant Neighborhoods Project, which is a 2024 City Council work plan priority item. This has evolved out of the prior zoning for affordable housing project that was done in 2023. You'll recall that we discussed the scope of this project at an April City Council meeting where we got feedback on some of the suggestions from council that we've been analyzing and vetting with the public over the last few months. We've been doing more analysis. We've been doing a number of different ways of outreach. And we also spoke to Planning Board on this project on September 17th. So we're here tonight to basically give an update and get direction on this project before we move forward with an ordinance. So as I note, the purpose of tonight is to have just a discussion on this, get more specific feedback before we step forward. So there's a lot to cover tonight, obviously. So I've created this slide to kind of break down the components of this presentation. So starting off with just an introduction, really about how the Boulder Valley Comprehensive Plan talks about housing and the housing need in Boulder, touching on also the state's involvement in housing in Colorado. And then I'm going to move into background and then engagement. So just reminding council about the problem statement for the project, talk about the project goals, a summary of the zoning for affordable housing project that was done last year, then the city council suggestions that have become the core of this project and how we've analyzed those, as well as in community engagement, which is related to the zoning for affordable housing project and it's kind of blended into this project on the topic. Then we'll get into the analysis of the options. I know it's been some time since we discussed this in April, so it's a little bit of a refresher of what the analysis has been, but it has evolved through the course of the project. And then we'll get to the conclusion and next steps. Oh, the one thing I wanted to mention too in the analysis section is that I'm going to stop after each topic so that there can be questions and actual feedback given on that topic. So it'll be chopped up that way just to be a little bit more efficient so we don't have a whole bunch of stuff at the end. So as with anything with planning, the starting point is the Boulder Valley Comprehensive Plan. This is the guiding document for the city. It sets the vision. It's at the top, you have the sustainability, equity, and resilience framework, and then you have the Boulder Valley Comprehensive Plan. And then the things related to land use get implemented through our land use code. So what we are proposing tonight, again, are using the current Boulder Valley Comprehensive Plan as that framework, as the guidance for the changes. And the changes that we are recommending on are what we've found to be consistent with the current version of the BVCP. So in terms of land use, this is the land use map, just as a reminder. It's a colorful map that shows all the different areas and typologies in the city, residential, commercial, business. All of this gets described pretty in detail in the BVCP in terms of the characteristics of the area, the vision for the area, the uses that are allowed in those areas, as well as the maximum density. So that's a maximum dwelling units per acre that exists in many of the residential areas of the city. So when you look at the BVCP, the update that was done in 2015, housing is obviously a big issue now. It was also a big issue back then. It's pretty much the #1 priority of the 2015 BVCP. So we've been over these past few years doing a number of different projects to implement the BVCP, even before we move into the next update. So we're still working on those implementation steps. So, part of that is, the changes that we did last year with the zoning for affordable housing, as well as the changes to ADUs, the changes to occupancy, all are things related to housing. So as far as the state's gotten into the game as far as putting out bills that relate to housing statewide. So I'm just going to touch on these really briefly, but there's been a lot of bills to monitor this year. There's Proposition 123, which was last year, and this actually is a bill that requires expedited review of permanently affordable housing projects. There actually is a kind of like a shot clock or a timeline that these projects have to be reviewed, and if they're not decided upon in a certain period of time, they're deemed approved. So we're looking at how that would have to be met. I think the way the proposition is set up is it requires cities and municipalities to comply with it in 2027. So there's also the residential growth management bill that was from last year. So the council will recall that we brought an ordinance through in February of this year to remove the growth management system to comply with that state law. The other state laws that we're looking at are ones related to prohibiting residential occupancy limits and as well as accessory dwelling units. These are ordinances that we're drafting now and we'll be bringing before council in the next couple months in response to those state bills. Looking into the future, there's the Housing and Transit-Oriented Communities Bill, which talks about increasing density in certain areas along transit corridors that have a certain frequency. We'll get into the details of that next year. And then there's the Sustainable Affordable Housing Bill that talks about updating housing elements and determining housing need as part of comprehensive plan updates. And we're looking into that as well. So moving into the background and engagement that's been done with this project, I just wanted to talk about the bridge from zoning for affordable housing to the family-friendly vibrant neighborhoods project. So just a reminder, the problem statement that is pretty much the same as the zoning for affordable housing project, that we are dealing with housing challenges and increasing costs and trying to look at it from a number of different ways to help with those rising costs. The project goals relate to expanding housing choice in Boulder and supporting transit use by allowing more missing middle housing in the community. As we've presented in the past, only 9% of the housing types in Boulder are considered middle housing. So again, just a reminder that middle housing is a housing type. It's not an income range or price point. We're talking more about kind of smaller, more modest sized units that are not single family homes, or they could be small single family homes, but mostly duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes, townhouses are those types of housing types. What we see in Boulder and the United States broadly is mostly single family and mostly apartment or condo building. So we're trying to fill in that gap to try to get comparatively more affordable housing types within the city. So just loosening up zoning to allow those types of housing types that are currently restricted in some areas, and looking at other areas for removing zoning barriers. So just a reminder of the feedback that we got in our community engagement for the Zoning for Affordable Housing project. I'm not going to read through all these because we've gone through this before, but there's obviously mixed opinions on the topic, and there are housing proponents, there are folks that are concerned about adding intensity into their neighborhoods for like parking and traffic impacts. We did do a questionnaire last year. Again, as we've said before, it's not a statistically valid survey, but it does enable us one of the tools that we use to gauge where the public is on a number of different issues. When we asked questions about adding housing, particularly duplexes and triplexes, last year there was a slight majority that were in support of it, but we also have to point out that at that time we weren't looking at adjustments to the density calculations in low density residential areas, and most of the housing was focused in high density residential areas, commercial areas, and industrial areas. So the scope of this particular project has kind of looked more at areas around neighborhood centers, along corridors, and some of those areas are low density residential areas. Again, I'm not going to read through this whole slide, but this just covers the changes that were done last year. So some site review thresholds were changed that were based on dwelling units, so we didn't want to discourage people from moving forward with adding housing. A lot of planning board review processes and public hearings for adding additional units were removed from the code. A lot of form and bulk standards were changed and updated to be more loose for townhouses to allow them by right and not push them all into site review. Duplexes and triplexes were allowed by right in the low density areas, but at current density requirements. The use review process was eliminated for ELUs, but largely a lot of the caps in density in the business, industrial, and high density residential areas were removed and were replaced with an FAR cap, rather to try to get more smaller, modest size housing units rather than the large types of units that the zoning was dictating. So when we brought that ordinance to council, and I think it was in September of last year, these are the 7 suggestions that council asked staff to explore further as future work on working on housing. So these are what we're going to talk about tonight. Because City Council largely supported the 6th and 7th suggestions related to working on the site review thresholds and looking at the industrial zones, again, for the incentives for residential. The fact that also that planning board supported those as well. For the sake of brevity, as much as I can, I'm trying to keep this presentation a little bit slim. We're not going to talk about 6 and 7 tonight. Rather, we're going to focus on 1 through 5. So I'll go into the details of 1 through 5, which really relate to the RMX1 zone, the RM1 zone, the RR zones, the RL1 zone, and then looking at owner occupancy restrictions, as well as an exemption for permanently affordable housing projects from site review. That'll be the focus of the discussion tonight. So I'm going to touch on the engagement that we've gotten just over this summer and through the course of this year. Again, a lot of this is a continuation of what was done with the Zoning for Affordable Housing project. We've had this at a level of consult since the changes are meant to implement the current BVCP, which has policies on increasing housing along transit corridors and around neighborhood centers, particularly in line with BVCP policy 2.16, mixed use and high density development. We've presented to different groups on this issue, on both sides of the issue, to hear their perspectives, and we've summarized that in the memo and up on the slide here. A lot of the issues is, things we've heard before from both sides of it. We've also been presenting to affordable housing residents as part of this project, and using the racial equity instrument as part of it as well, again, as a continuation from the prior project. We have heard on both sides, that more housing will help solve the cost problem and mitigate the jobs housing imbalance. We've heard from a number of folks that we should go farther, make more bold changes to address the housing challenges of the community. More housing, even if it's not deed restricted, does contribute to the Affordable Housing Fund. So that's just a reminder. And then support for putting housing along bus corridors around downtown and neighborhood centers to support the goals that the city has on 15-minute neighborhoods, for instance. We've also been hearing concerns and caution from certain elements of the community that, you know, the affordable housing that should be added should be deed restricted, and that if we add housing, it may not be affordable. And there's concerns about what those impacts would be to neighborhoods. I read a lot of comments in the responses that said we need to stop the amount of building that Boulder is doing, and that it's impacting the whole community. So we've been hearing a lot of those concerns as well, and that's also attached to the packet. So like the previous project, we did do a questionnaire this year. I did put a Be Heard Boulder questionnaire. It's actually a story map questionnaire, which is different from Be Heard Boulder, but it's not a statistically valid survey. Again, like the prior one, it's just one tool that we use to get feedback on this. We didn't get as many responses as we did on the project from last year, where we got over 1,000 responses. I think maybe even more than that. In this case, it was 375 plus responses. Again, mostly mixed results, where we saw more positivity towards adding housing last time. I think that's kind of gone down in the sense because the focus has gone on low density residential areas. So the level of support when we look at the questionnaire results is more like 30 to 40%, whereas it was about 50 to 60% that were not in support of some of the changes, particularly in the low density residential areas. When we asked the community through this questionnaire if there was support for owner occupancy restrictions, and also just through some of the discussions we had with members of the public, we did hear a pretty high level of support for that, just because of the concerns about investment properties coming in and buying up properties. I think people on both sides of the issue kind of share that concern. So I'm going to jump into the analysis of options. Again, some of this is just a little bit of a refresher. So how does Boulder regulate density? Obviously, in the lower density residential areas, which are more the focus of this, the RR zones only are permitted to have less than 2 dwelling units per acre. In the RL zones, it's 2 to 6 dwelling units per acre, so 6 dwelling units per acre is the cap. And we also list on the slide what the land use code says to get those results from the BVCP. So in the RR zone, the minimum lot area per dwelling unit is 30,000 square feet. In the RE zone, which is not a subject of this particular project, but it's 7,500 square feet. And then RL1 is 7,000 square feet of lot area per dwelling unit. So when we started this project, the things that were pointed out to us by members of council is that obviously the BVCP is a visionary document, and it's more high level, and it doesn't necessarily quantify density in the same way that the land use code does. You can see that there are some references to averaging, that the way the BVCP is written is it looks more at kind of the holistic, what is the overall density for a whole land area rather than by parcel like the land use code does. So we were prompted to kind of look at it through the lens of what if we were to look at these polygons of density of land use designations as a full polygon as gross density, and that would include, you know, school properties, public properties, open space properties, rights of way, things of that nature, which is not how it's done through the net density calculation, which is parcel by parcel. So in looking at that, we did an analysis of a number of the different zones, and we talked about this in April. But basically what we found is that even the gross and net densities were actually quite a bit below the maximums, even when you looked at it from a gross density lens. So that spoke to that there is some room for allowing additional housing and still being consistent with the BVCP. So starting on with suggestion 1, which focuses on RMX1, and again, I'll stop after this each suggestion to answer questions and get feedback. In this case, we're looking at RMX1, which only really covers 2% of the city, but it is an important part of the city. It's a number of neighborhoods that are older historic neighborhoods that surround downtown, like parts of the Goss Grove neighborhood, parts of University Hill, parts of Whittier, just north of downtown in the purple as shown here. So this has an interesting description in the BVCP that relates to kind of the complicated history of the zone, which I also talked about briefly in the hotline response. That it's had a number of different zoning districts over the years, ranging from lower density up to higher density, and then back to low again. It had high density residential, which allowed 27 dwelling units per acre for a time, and then changed back to a low density. So we have basically a mix of single family and apartment buildings in this part of the city, and it's now it's under 6,000 square foot of lot area per dwelling unit, which is pretty similar to RL1. So when we're doing the analysis for compliance, with the BVCP, we have to look at the characteristic description, which talks about, an intentional look at this area that it has been impacted by traffic and parking. And then we also have to look at the density range, which is 6 to 20 dwelling units per acre, to determine whether changes are consistent. So when you walk around, these zones, it has a variety of different sized buildings, a lot of historic housing stock. You can see there's some large single family homes. What we've tried to clearly communicate to the public through the story map questionnaire are these images to show that the overall intent of this whole project is to not increase intensity in terms of massing and FAR or height, things like that. It's to keep and maintain the setbacks, maintain the height, maintain bulk plane, all the restrictions that apply to these buildings, but just allow more units to be within those structures. So not a big visual change in terms of the massing of buildings, but just encouraging the option that what could only be a single family house today could actually be broken up into perhaps like a triplex. And again, that would help us at getting at that missing middle housing that we need in the community. So we've offered this analysis in the past that there is some caution with this zone in the sense that in the past, we used the terms established and developing in the land use code. That's no longer in the land use code and it's not in the plan, but this is kind of where RMX grew out of, is that it's a mixed density zone that has a mix of housing types. Generally, RMX1 was an area where they didn't foresee a lot of change, and RMX2 in North Boulder was an area where you would see more housing units. But also recognizing that it is an area that's surrounding downtown. It's a walkable area. It has a lot of access to transit. Does it make sense to keep it as a low density designation? So these are all the things that we have to kind of bear in mind. Our recommendation when we talked in April was to change the density calculation from 6,000 square feet of lot area per dwelling unit to 3,000, and we're still recommending that tonight. Council's direction was to look at maybe changing that to 2,500 or 1,500. So I wanted to follow up on that. We did an analysis of the parcels in the RMX zone, and you can see in this was also in the hotline response, is that all the properties that are in orange are those that are over 20 dwelling units per acre. So that these properties wouldn't be adding any units. The ones that are in gray are in a range of densities, and as we noted in that, 18% of the parcels would exceed that 20 dwelling units per acre, and about 80% of the parcels actually exceed the current density of 6,000 square feet per unit. So there is some room for allowing housing here. With the 3,000, as we're recommending, that could over time yield about 2,500 units. If it was to go lower to say 2,500, by maxing out, you could potentially get 3,500 units. Again, these are numbers that are just theoretical. If like every single property were to decide all at once to add units, that's what it would look like in the long term. These are changes that would play out over long periods of time, and that applies to all the changes we're talking about tonight. So we took this analysis to Planning Board. Planning Board was generally supportive of the change. Some members noted that the parking requirements in this zone were too high because it was calculated by bedroom. But that was something that we'll be looking at through the parking project. One board member was skeptical that more smaller units would be comparatively cheaper. And there were two board members that felt that staff, should suggest going farther and going to that 2,500 square feet of lot area per dwelling unit. Again, we're continuing to recommend the 3,000 just to be cognitive of the impacts of the traffic and congestion that have come up in the past. So that's what's kind of holding our recommendation at 3,000. So that concludes that particular item. Happy to answer any questions on that and then hear the feedback of council on RMX1.
Great, thanks for that, Carl. Just to frame our discussion, I think the way that we're going to structure it tonight is Carl's going over each of the 5 main items. We'll ask clarifying questions and then go to discussion. And my plan is just to start with the presumption that we agree with the staff recommendation, and then people can opine on if they would like to be different from the staff recommendation. And that's totally okay and welcome, but just we'll start from a starting point of the staff recommendation. And then just to reiterate something you said before, Carl, that the missing middle that you're talking about here is a unit type. It's a housing type. It's not about price per se.
Correct.
People are welcome to talk about price if they would like to, but the missing middle that we're talking about tonight is really about the housing type rather than a price.
That's right.
Great. With all those things in mind, I'll see if we have any clarifying questions. Yeah, Tara and Tina.
Hey, Carl. Thanks. Thanks for that great presentation. Tell me, in the University Hill area, is it all RMX1, or is it partially RMX1 and then partially?
It's partially RMX1. Other parts of the hill are RL1.
So do you know about where that is in terms of streets? Is there a map somewhere that I could see that? Only because I'm concerned about the properties that are unconforming. That's the phrase.
On this, if you look at the southern part of the zones, that's where a lot of the orange is along Broadway. I don't think my cursor is visible, but like Grandview and Marine Street are RMX1. But the other streets are a lot of the streets are RL1.
Thank you so much.
So this is Arapahoe. This is Marine Street right here. This is Broadway. This is Grandview University. So when you get into, you can see there's a couple blocks like University, Pennsylvania. This is going to be BMS in this area. There's RH5, like high density residential, like in this area. But this is where your RL1 largely is. So this is like, is that 6th Street is the boundary there. And then just north of University is the boundary. Does that help?
Great, and I'll just read a little bit of that into the record there because you're off mic. Just the point being that the RMX area, a lot of it is along Arapahoe and Marine and a little bit along Grandview and a little bit to points further south. But as you get west, closer to the foothills, it's RL1.
That's right.
And then BMS zone in the commercial area. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I thank you for all the visuals and the great overview. Would one of the likely outcomes with this adoption be that you'd see more single-family homes converted into a multiple unit home?
Potentially, yes. It depends on the size of the lot, obviously. I think we looked at a number of the lots out there, and a lot of the lots are, 6,000 square feet. So that could be a lot of single family homes that could switch to a duplex, for instance. But as you get to, per the staff recommendation, you'd have to have a 9,000 square foot lot to have a triplex, for instance.
Okay, so then, is it likely that that would be a duplex that would appeal to families? Or do you think it would, like for instance, in the University Hill, it would be mostly divided into units for more student housing? What do you think might happen?
I think it depends on the area. Obviously, like a lot of the hill is already well over the density, so I don't see a lot of the change in that area. It's more like Whittier, where you can see the gray in the upper part of the RMX zone, where I think that would be a family-friendly type area, like where you could have small families being able to locate in, starter homes that could be like in a duplex, for
So
instance.
that would be where they'd take a larger home and then put it into a duplex where you
Right.
think it might be able to accommodate two families.
Yeah.
Okay. And then I appreciated the part of the packet that talked about how to think about conversion rather than demolition. Are there any incentives that we've used in the past to strongly create that rather than going through a demolition exercise?
Yeah, I don't know if that we have any, incentives. Obviously, a lot of the housing stock in this zone is historic, so there would be a landmarks board or a landmarks alteration certificate required for changes. So there's a lot of incentives to, landmark homes or protect homes through that process. And so our hope is that it would encourage people to preserve a building and do internal conversion. We have seen that, in like Goss Grove, where they've been able to keep, the outside of the building, but do changes on the inside to get more units.
Okay. I mean, one thing, what I'm interested in truly is the title of this project, which is for families. And because we've been really successful at building high density student housing and student housing for one person or two individuals. And many of these are located in parks and amenities. I just wonder if there's any way to create incentives and even tax credits or, permit, waiving permits for work that yields to places that are likely to appeal to two families instead of one, rather than multiple units for single people, which we seem to be addressing in other ways. It's not that they don't matter or anything, but I mean, that would be sort of my hope out of most of these options.
I think we'd have to look into that in a little bit more depth, and
Yeah.
it might be something that we take on as part of the BVCP update as well.
Okay, thank you.
Did you have a follow-up? Yeah, just a quick follow-up. Okay, and then I got Nicole and Ryan.
A quick follow-up to Tina's question, Carl. So as you know, I also called you to ask a lot of questions just so I can understand. You're saying that in the RMX 1 zone on University Hill, there would be little difference because it's already over-densified.
I mean, that's our sense, and also the fact that, it might make some more properties less non-conforming. Maybe a few might become conforming, but we're not anticipating a lot of changes on there just because you can see all the orange in that area.
Thank you. Thanks so much for the presentation so far. One of the things that I just wonder about when we see results from convenience sample surveys is what should we take away from that? Because especially in the absence of other kind of feedback, it really is a very selective sample, and I'm not quite sure what to make of it.
Well, again, it's one tool, where I will say that, we had a very broad email list, the same list that we used for zoning for affordable housing. It was sent to all those emails. So we tried to keep it as broad as we could to get feedback.
Yeah, and I'll just add, Councilmember, Mayor Pro Tem, this is Brad Mueller, Director of Planning and Zoning. I think back to earlier in my career where kind of the only tool we had at our fingertips were open houses, and there were natural limits to those too. And we always, strive to find other ways to expand our understanding of community interest in this. But at the end of the day, we think that some kind of input at least informs the discussion. We simply can't afford to do a statistically valid survey on everything, which costs tens of thousands of dollars typically to do. But we do also temper that information with our own professional understanding of the issue and the previous conversations that have been had with you, planning board, and others as part of that too. So we recognize its limitations, but also see it as a mechanism for getting a way to understand some of the issues.
Um, I have a comment around that, but should I make it later? I have a couple more questions. Okay, I'm gonna come back to a comment for that.
Yeah, just out of curiosity, for the Boulder Valley Comp Plan engagement surveys, would that be a statistically, oh my gosh, the word is escaping me.
Valid, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I can speak to that. We've currently have planned 2 statistically valid surveys as part of that. Again, that's just one of a whole suite of ways to get input, including this is a chance for me to plug Saturday's kickoff event, which will be another mechanism for that.
And that is this coming Saturday from 1 o'clock to 4 o'clock at the Dairy Arts Center, the Boulder Valley Comprehensive Plan Kickoff Event. Come one, come all, please. Nicole?
Thank you. And I think one of the other questions that I have is just thinking about all the state legislation. It's obviously, we're working in this world where the state legislation is evolving. Is there any sort of math involved in terms of how we are meeting those requirements? Like, would we need to potentially do all of the recommended staff changes in order to have a chance at getting to that? Like, can we mix and match? Like, do we have any information on that yet? And it's okay if we don't, just wondering.
We don't really have a direct nexus between the state bills and this particular project. I think we've found with the transit-oriented communities one, for instance, we've talked about how that's kind of a separate area of the city and areas that we'd have to designate for potential additional density. It's not really, these are not those areas. So we're not seeing that nexus.
Okay, thank you. And then just one question I just want to clarify for the record. When we talk about families, our definition is broader than a man, a woman, and 2 children, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, just wanted to be clear for that. And I would just ask colleagues as well to be mindful of this as we're talking about it, that especially with demographics showing that household sizes are going to get smaller, that fewer households will have children, that we just really expand our thinking about what a family is and who's living together. It's not always going to involve a child or children, and that will probably be more true as we head into the coming decades. So sorry, moment of personal privilege, but just wanted to ask for that. Thank you.
Ryan, and then Lauren, and then Taisha.
Okay, this is either a basic question or something I should have asked on a hotline. So we, per the first bullet here, and this is a question across a few of the proposals we'll get to. I'm just thinking about the interplay between the current decisions at hand versus the BVCP, which we will address soon, and thinking about how we have, a constraint, in a sense, on us now that we will have a chance to address with the BVCP update. I'm just wondering if there's a way to think about, like, making sure what we're doing is consistent with the current BVCP and not presupposing any changes, but then also expressing, should we wish to express, doing something outside of what the BVCP currently allows, should that become available to us. Is there a way to do that now, or is it just like all we can do really is, if it's let's, for example, say it's a density limit, go as far as we want towards within the BVCP, and then we need to address the BVCP, and then we would just need to come back to this later. I guess I'm just thinking about the sequencing of all that. Is there a more simple way to think about it?
Well, I think the way we've tried to frame it is that there's a number of different things that have to be looked at from the policy level as to whether it's consistent with the BVCP. It's the BVCP policies, the land use designations, the characteristics and use description, and the density limit. So I think all those have to be weighed. I think the density limit is more of a hard thing. It's a hard number that's easy to say yes or no to. It's more is it consistent with the character of the neighborhood or how the characteristics are described? And I think that's what is before council to decide. Mm-hmm. So we're presenting to council what our analysis shows, what we think is consistent with the BVCP, looking at all those things. But yeah, if there are parts that kind of are more than just the density limits, That's something that's probably going to have to be looked at through the next update, whether the vision for an area needs to change or an area is designated for more housing, things like that. I don't know if that answers your question.
Thank you. Maybe just a follow up. I'm just thinking then. Would it make sense that if council members now wish to express that if the BVCP limit were to change, that there would be a desire for our family-friendly zoning policy to change in accordance, and to say that now, so that after we address the BVCP updates, which is going to happen within the next year or so, with this body, that it would simplify the process of kind of truing up with our desire now.
I don't think it hurts. I think, this is really phase one of a two-phase project. So phase one will cease when this ordinance, is acted on, and then phase two will then begin, and that'll run alongside the BVCP update. So I think you could provide feedback, I think, tonight on your thoughts for the future, I guess.
And just to add to that, so I think, adding that and providing all that context as part of this discussion is what we're certainly hearing. But I do also want to point out that we are aiming towards trying to bring a specific ordinance to the council actually by the end of the year yet. And it wouldn't be appropriate to try to incorporate in that context. So, we'll take all of this in, but that's where we'll have to, make those kind of distinctions.
And if I can chime in from a facilitation standpoint, if you don't mind, Ryan, that if you want to put out a comment or two about how you might think about the broader future, that's fine. But I wouldn't want to try to set up a phase two target before we've gotten to BVCP. Just from probably it's not. It would be hard to craft, and it would not have regulatory authority. Is that right?
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Thanks all.
Lauren?
Mine's more of a comment than a question, I've decided.
We'll come back to you then. Question, Taisha?
So mine was very much aligned with what are the authorities that we have now versus what we will have with the Boulder Valley Comp Plan update. And basically, is there anything that we would do now that could negatively impact the update to the BVSD, the Boulder Valley Comp Plan, acronym challenged?
I mean, it really kind of depends on how far council were to stray from what's recommended. But I'd say what we're recommending is safely, within the framework of the BVCP. It's the more that I can't see where it would jeopardize like future actions, I guess, if that's what you're asking.
Okay. And then a different question than that. So just like habitat impacts of this, was that considered? I think one of I've appreciated all the analysis, very helpful. But I did have questions around, one of the benefits of single family is that there's more landscaping and habitat. And I heard you on trying to stay within the existing footprint as much as possible. But when they're not able to do that and it spreads out, I was just curious if there was any considerations or consultation with the climate initiatives team around that.
Yeah, there wasn't any discussions of that nature relative to habitats because of the fact that we are not proposing any changes to the footprint of buildings or size of buildings, FAR, bulk plane. It's really all going to be the same parameters on a building as part of this proposal. It's just allowing more units.
Okay.
If you're talking about like expansion beyond what we currently allow, that could affect a habitat. That's not in the scope of this.
Okay. And then to the question of the existing footprint, just water and energy considerations. Are there any significant differences in water and energy use based on?
We did talk to our utility staff about this. They were comfortable with these particular changes. I think as we go into the BVCP update, they're going to have to look at whatever path the city chooses to go down and whether there's capacity. But generally, in this case, it's just, I think the findings that they have found is that like even higher density tends to actually use less water in some regards because there's not lawns, in certain areas where there's higher density versus a single family house, for instance. So they didn't have any concerns with this particular phase of the project.
Okay, and then climate initiatives?
We didn't have any direct conversations with them. Again, we weren't anticipating any environmental changes. Again, the only zone where there's a change in like the footprint of buildings potentially is RM1, which we'll get to next. But we've not talked to climate initiatives about this particular project.
Okay. Oh, thank you.
Question? Okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry. And I did ask some questions about SB 24-174 because I actually appreciated a lot of the elements they look at when doing the housing assessment that included the jobs housing balance, the water supply element, the prevention of sprawl, and mandatory long and short-term affordability strategies. And one of those strategies was around displacement. And I was also appreciative of the report on the housing consolidated housing plan that Kurt sent. And one of the remarks they made is how quickly our affordable private rental market has deteriorated. And when we look at a project like this, would we anticipate that, I'm assuming it will be a lot of rentals in this case. I don't know if the idea is to incentivize condoization, but would we expect overall rents to increase because people would be investing more and it would be a bigger investment opportunity? And are there any mitigation strategies we could think about for people who are displaced into the higher rent units?
I don't know that I have a great answer for that. I think our sense was just that, allowing more units, there's going to be a mix of rental and ownership. I don't know that we were thinking that these changes would increase rents. I think that's something we'd have to look into more.
All right, I think we've exhausted our questions. So can you go to the question for us?
Sure.
Carl? Great. So should staff move forward with an ordinance to revise the density calculation in RMX1 to permit one dwelling unit per 3,000 square feet of lot area? Any alternative suggestions for changes to this zone? So as I said before, I'm going to start from saying we agree with you, but any thoughts on ways that we would prefer to do something different? Lauren?
Thank you, and thank you for all of the wonderful maps and thought that has gone into this. For me, I think I pushed fairly hard for us to consider this RMX1 zone, and for me that's partially because of what I've seen in my work. So it's anecdotal at this point. I know I asked about how many units have been added or removed in this area, but for me personally, I, through my work, have been asked to remove more housing units in this zone than any other zone in town because, as Kurt said, 80% of the parcels in this zone do not comply with their underlying zoning. So when people want to expand their closet in a historic house that typically has a tiny closet, that little change in square footage is not allowed. Those kinds of things people don't have access to. And what I find in my line of work is that this often means making things that were not single family homes into single family homes so that people can do the remodels that they would like. And through that, I think that that our current zoning doesn't keep us in line with the Boulder Valley Comprehensive Plan. I think that we're losing the diversity of housing types that the comprehensive plan says that we should be protecting. And so because of that, I think there is such variety in this zone, we cannot go to the extent that we would be allowing everything that currently exists. But I would like to see us change the lot area requirements to 2,500 square feet so that we can maintain try and allow as many of the existing structures as possible to become compliant with the underlying zoning while still staying within the bounds of the unit calculations in the comprehensive plan.
That's a nice, solid, and concrete proposal there. Thanks, Lauren. And my memory from reading the packet is that while that wasn't the staff recommendation, it was still within the broad unit limits. Is that correct?
It's with it, yeah. It wouldn't put theoretically, if everything were to develop at that rate, it wouldn't go over the 20 dwelling units per acre, considering the existing nonconformities as well. However, again, it's those other parts. It's beyond just the metric cap that has to be looked at in the BVCP relative to the the impacts in that area. So that's why we kind of stayed with the 3,000, but you could go to 2,500 and not go over that density max.
Got it. Okay, thanks for that. So I want to stick on this then and get the will of council in terms of whether this is something people are interested in. If anybody wants to address this specific question, feel free, Ryan.
I just wanted to agree with Councilmember Folkerts. I think in addition, per the BVCP, we are entrusted with traffic and parking, and a modern transport planning approach would tell you that when we have housing near the core of downtown that's walkable, if we can let more people do that, then we will reduce our need for cars. So per person, we're going to be improving on the probabilistically on the traffic situation and giving ourselves greater resources per household to fund public transportation amenities. So I think that's another reason to stretch a little bit. So leave it at that.
Great. And I'll just call on myself real quick and say that I like this proposal as well. I think you'd see just a modest amount of additional units, but within the same footprint of the building to the discussion we had before. So no, not that the buildings would be larger, but there would be, here and there, one additional unit perhaps, and another opportunity for a family of whatever kind to live there. So I'm going to oh yeah, Tina, go. Sure.
So when you say that there would be an additional unit, then would you expect that to be like a 2-bedroom unit? Is that kind of from like two bedrooms and one bedroom, or? And I really respect the definition of family as being very broad, and personally had some issues with the name change because when people say the word family, while we have an inclusive definition of that, and we also put in the description of this project a goal to increase the number of children, people with children, because of the BVSD enrollment changes. So not only we sort of self-defined it in a way that there might be a community expectation. If we're just going to, I think it's great to just do housing for people, and that's fine. And we may want to go back to that so that we're more consistent with what we're talking about. But my concern would be, and I really am not opposed to this idea at all, but if we break it into into smaller units, are we creating environments for people with children, whether it's one person or whether it's, whether one person, one child or not? And that would be my only, question.
I mean, I guess I might just say that it's unknowable exactly what types, how many bedrooms you would get. And so, but this would be a relatively small incremental change. So I don't think it would wholesale switch it from 3 bedrooms to 1 bedroom. But Nicole?
Did you have something to? Oh, okay. I just wanted to make a broader comment about the middle housing type and how this sort of plays in, right? So right now there's a lot of folks who may prefer to be in a smaller, like a 2-bedroom versus the 3 or 4 bedroom that they were in when, they had kids and everything. And I think that part of creating more of this middle housing type is to create a healthier ecosystem where people are kind of moving through. So it may not be that these are the exact areas where we would get more families with children, but as people are moving, as they have a little bit more choice in terms of the housing type they have, they may move into this, which would then free up, a 3 or 4 bedroom home somewhere else. So anyway, just wanted to note that too.
So my only thought would be if there's a way, one of the things you sent out, Mayor Pro Tem, was the Dr. Cog survey and how 9 out of 10 units need to be affordable moving forward for it to meet the increased demand. So if there are any tools we have, and I want to ask this really broadly about how can we create the conditions to bring down the price of this type of renovation or whatever we could do, I would just be interested in that. As well as any ideas that you all learn from your colleagues across the country that are doing this same work and dealing with these same problems.
Yep, Tara.
Would it be valid to say, though, that the staff came to their conclusion because of reasons? I mean, shouldn't we wait till we have community input on the Boulder Valley Comp Plan before we push so much that community is going to get aggravated because we're not listening to them? So isn't 3,000, isn't it 6,000 now?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, isn't 3,000 half of 6,000? So now we're going even more than that. So while I appreciate the Fogarty Amendment, that was a joke.
Not one of those again.
I think it's valid and reasonable to say, let's just do half and listen to staff instead of push the envelope before we have the BVCP. Plus, I don't feel like crowded is necessarily better. Well, I'm a big believer in more housing. I feel we really should be thinking about those types of things as well. That's it.
Taisha?
I would be interested in the 2,500 and just exploring that, since this is still, you're asking for feedback, and I would be interested in knowing what the difference is between 3,000 square feet and 2,500. Thank you.
And I'll make the caveat that we have heard recently about other ordinances that this is an initial direction, but of course at the public hearing, when we have an ordinance in front of us, we can make a different decision at that time. So I'll go ahead and straw poll this. How many people raise your hand if you'd be interested in a 2,500 square foot for lot area? I got 6. 5. Yeah, I was subtracting 3, but we don't have 9 people here tonight. Thanks for that. Okay, so there's a 5-3 majority interested in the 2,500 number. Any other suggestions for change to the staff proposal? Seeing none, then I think we can go to the next one, please, Carl.
Okay, we're gonna, excuse me, shift to RM1. So that's what's shown in the orange color on the zoning map relative to where RMX is. You can see RM1 is a medium density zone that's found in a number of areas in the city along 28th Street, particularly around our neighborhood centers. And this is a zone that's based on open space. So the current calculation is 3,000 square feet of open space per dwelling unit. And then we obviously have our the BVCP description and the maximum of 14 dwelling units per acre, which applies to this zone. This is some of the imagery that we sent out to the community of the types of housing that you often see in RM1. It can be apartment buildings, it can be single family homes, it can be townhouses just at that medium density, which is 6 to 14 dwelling units per acre. The graphics are showing you could have under today's rules, have a single unit that looks like on the left, and then potentially, again, we'd have the same parameters, except in this case, there'd be less open space that's proposed per the staff recommendation, but you could get an additional unit potentially by adding that flexibility. So again, adding more to the missing middle housing. So we did an analysis of this. I think 300 square feet of open space per dwelling unit versus lot area, it's hard to determine what the difference is, but we've looked at allowing a 23% increase in this zone, since there's a number of properties that are already kind of locked in with a lot of HOAs and condos and everything. So based on that, we pushed a little bit further to get to you could potentially add 800 units, hypothetically over the long term. City Council, when we talked about this in April, was largely supportive of the change, but there was some differences on whether it should be lot area or open space. When we talked to planning board, there was more of a preference to change it to just to 2,000 square feet of lot area per dwelling unit, just because it's more straightforward. But we've also been hearing in the community a number of folks that are concerned about reducing open space and or not using open space just based on the character of some of these developments. And for instance, like the RL2 areas of the city, they're a low density zone that's based on open space. They do have a slightly different character than RL1. So I think based on that, staff is holding to our recommendation that it should be 2,000 square feet of open space per dwelling unit. It would still add some flexibility and would still kind of hold true to how the zone was put in place at first. I think the planning board wasn't as concerned about that just because there was one board member that didn't support it, but just that a lot of the developments in these particular areas, it's, lawn space that counts as open space. It's not necessarily functional. So they felt like maybe a lot area calculation just might be simpler. So that's pretty much all there is for RM1. So we're recommending the 2,000 square feet of open space from the 3,000 square feet of open space.
Thanks. Clarifying questions? Yeah. Taisha, and then
I'm going to come back to the habitat question on this one.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't have conversations with climate initiatives about this. Obviously, it could impact, the amount of open space on a property. I don't know that there's a lot of sensitive habitats in these areas. They're largely all built out. It would really, you'd probably see some properties redevelop that are already developed that just had a lot of lawn and green spaces like that. I don't know. I can't think of examples where there's, wetlands. Obviously, if there's like wetlands, things like that, we already have other regulations that protect those and buffer wetlands. So I think from where we're sitting, we're not so concerned about that, just since a lot of these places are already kind of built out already.
And just want to clarify though, on your team though, is there somebody with expertise around habitat and that kind of thing?
Yeah, I mean, we certainly could have that.
I just want to make sure.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Because you said you didn't connect with the climate teams. I'm like, whoa.
Yep.
So that does make me feel better about that. Although going back to the RMX1, if we're increasing that many people and we're not increasing, there's not a requirement to increase there. So if there's increased density there, there's still increased density. So I guess my questions are just around the intersect and the assumption that, a lot of those dwellings may already have, natural habitat and part of the pollinator program and all these things. So they are a part of our connectivity, which we know is a continuing issue. So thank you for the answers to those questions.
Nicole?
Yeah, I just had a couple of questions. One, I just want to clarify that when we're talking about open space per dwelling unit, it could be that there is no plant or tree or anything involved in that, but it's just like a deck or a patio or something like that. Is that
open
correct?
space there's a whole list of what counts as open space in the code. It could be lawn, it could be a hardscape area that you sit in, it could be trees, a grove of trees, it could actually be a little landscape area 2 feet in width. Like, it gets really detailed. So it's not all necessarily functional open space, but it's all meant to provide relief to density. That's the way it was developed in the 1970s. But yeah, it does include decks, balconies, but to a limited extent.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, yeah.
Thank you. Does the city have a biodiversity index that lets us know what types of, how these open spaces are being used and how they're contributing to our biodiversity efforts?
That I'm not sure of. I can check.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Then the other question that I had is just looking at this. So my neighborhood is one of the bigger ones on this map here. And we're right next to a park, a giant park, right? And I'm looking at some of these other places and it seems like they are right next to some city parks and spaces too. And so I guess my question is that observation correct? That many of these neighborhoods are very near and possibly even some of our larger parks.
Yeah, I would say just from driving around and going to some of these areas, I would agree with that observation.
No other questions? Okay, all right, so we'll again start with the staff recommendation. Should staff move forward with an ordinance to revise the density calculation in RM1 to permit 1 dwelling unit per 2,000 square feet of open space, or are there any alternative suggestions? Does anybody have any interest in doing something different? I see no hands raised.
I don't have any alternative recommendations at this time, but I do have just a general interest in the biodiversity indicators or index information. And again, and would love to revisit the open space definitions at some time. Maybe that's at the Boulder Valley Comp Plan update, but I'm just, even though there are parks nearby, in the 12 years I've lived here, there has been a significant increase in population. But we haven't seen a significant increase in our open space programs. And so we are seeing a significant decrease in air quality. There is a direct correlation to that. It's not just emissions reduction, but it is habitat loss by construction of commercial and residential, which I have seen an extension of. So it's just a general concern. And although I appreciate there are members of the team that have that expertise on habitat and wildlife and wildlife corridors, et cetera, I'm hopeful for deeper interdepartmental collaboration. Thank you.
Thanks. I'm supportive. I just have, I think this is the last chance for comments about this one in general. So I wanted to pick up on the same topic. I'm now hearing that sometimes open space might be taken as a proxy for native biodiversity, or that's what I might think of it as. That's actually not necessarily what's happening with open space. And I suppose I'm agreeing in a way with Councilmember Adams that I'd be interested in the future, whether it's the BVCP or it's whatever the time is, to isolate for that a little bit more, or at least have a conversation about isolating for what are we trying to solve, and if it's biodiverse, native pollinators and plants, then that's probably something we'd want to talk about, at least being direct about. So this is for later. I'm supportive of the measure. Thanks.
Yeah, and I'm again interested in any kind of way to create affordability and to create ownership opportunities.
Yep, Lauren?
Yeah, I appreciated Planning Board's recommendation on moving this to lot area, but in the interest of keeping things compliant with their underlying zoning, I think that continuing to measure it in the same way helps ensure that the things that are there are still compliant and we don't shift away from that. Although I will echo a lot of what has been said already by Ryan and Taisha, I do think that open space sounds very different than right? We have different kinds of open space, and in this context of zoning, I think it leads to a lot of confusion because a Woonerf Street and a balcony on someone's apartment both technically qualify as open space, but they might not have native plantings, nor are they accessible to the public in a way that that designation might sound to some people. So I hope that we will continue looking at that and moving away from that. I heard some interesting things around East Boulder sub-community plan and some of the things Planning Board was asking for there around actually having public open space potential requirements. And I think that is very intriguing. So I look forward to hearing how some of those things progress. Thank you.
Great, and I agree with everything that you just said. That was very, very well said. Not seeing any other hands raised, I think we got the thumbs up for the staff recommendation, and we can move to the next item.
Okay, great. All right, so suggestion number 3, this is probably the meatiest one and the one that applies to the broadest part of the city. So this map shows what's basically 3 zones that are on our very low residential and low residential, so RL1, RR1, and RR2. You can see there's a variety of pockets throughout the city. They cover a good chunk of the city and largely contain detached dwelling units. So when we're looking at this in terms of compliance with the BVCP, You can see the very low density residential is 2 dwelling units per acre or less, and then the low density residential is 2 to 6 dwelling units per acre. But we also have the the characteristics, which is predominantly single family as it's written in the comp plan right now, that we've tried to honor through our analysis. This is some of the imagery of different parts of the city. Every single family or detached dwelling unit neighborhood has a slightly different context. They were built at different times. Like RL2 is not in the scope of this because it's already a zone that allows a whole bunch of different types of housing types. But for the most part, it's detached dwelling units for most of these areas. So we've been trying to communicate through the questionnaires, in this case, again, all the height, bulk plane, FAR, setbacks, all that would remain the same. It's just the ability to potentially split or build a duplex on certain lots. And I think what we looked at through the analysis is trying to stick to that predominantly single family. So only allowing, no more than 50% of the lots to be eligible for duplexes, to be consistent with that. Even though the net and gross density analysis actually showed you could actually add, even more housing units, we do feel like it's important to stay true to that as it's in the BVCP. So in this case, we've been kind of floating around, a 40% increase. It would happen over a very long time, potentially decades. So it would stay predominantly single family. We're not going to see properties transform into a duplex overnight when an ordinance gets passed. So that's where we're kind of looking at that range of there's about like 10,000 properties in these zones. It'd be allowing around 4,000 or more than 4,000 to be eligible. So when we talked to council about this last time, we suggested a number of tweaks to the lot area per dwelling unit to get to that 40%. I think there was more interest in taking that amount of increase and just focusing it along bus corridors basically in the city. So that's what we've really focused on in our analysis since we spoke in April. So in this case, we looked at a number of different scenarios and what that would look like if you took that 4,300 number of lots and you spread it over all of the bus corridors in these zones. This is kind of what it looks like on here, that basically you have a number, just depending on the amount of increase, determines what the buffer, the distance from the bus corridor should be. So we looked at number one was 250 feet would be about a 30% increase. 300 feet would be 35%, and then 350 feet would match that 40% that I was talking about. So as part of the hotline response, we actually got a citywide map, and it's also on the dais in front of you where you can get a sense of the areas. That basically shows 450 on each side, and the reason we did 450 is because that's basically what most of the planning board was recommending, like push it up to almost 50%, and that would be 450. So this slide just kind of shows, the three different distances. You can see it's just in 50-foot increments. This is a map that we had produced before the hotline that just kind of shows where all the active bus routes are, and we're looking at bus routes on major streets that we would expect to continue to have bus routes. So this allowing them along those corridors, by allowing those lots to be eligible, no matter the lot size, would still fit within that 2 to 6 dwelling units per acre, and would also, again, over time would be predominantly single family in those areas. So our recommendation has been the 350 feet, which is at that 40%. When we talked to planning board about it, several board members were pushing, why not make it, since this is going to be gradual over time, why not bring it up to like 49%, for instance? So that would be basically making over 5,000 lots eligible. So that would be that 450-foot distance. So when you look at the materials in front of you, it shows what 450 would look like on either side of the corridor. There's a dotted line that shows the staff recommendation, which is the 350. There was one board member that was against this change, is finding that It would drive up land costs, create more luxury duplexes, and would remove existing housing stock. So that brings us to the key issue question. Again, the staff recommendation is 350 feet because it aligns with that 40% increase.
Great, thanks for that, Carl. Clarifying questions on this item? Tina.
Yeah. I have a couple questions. The first is for the area that's up on Spine and 63rd. What does that area look like now? I'm not as familiar there. And has there been engagement specifically in that community?
Up in Gun Barrel?
Yeah.
I mean, I've driven through that neighborhood. I think I even took pictures. It's pretty large lots, pretty large homes
Right.
up there. We have sent out the questionnaire via Nextdoor, which hits all of those zones. I haven't looked specifically about respondents from that area, but hoping that the awareness got.
But to clarify, I mean, there's only the tiniest sliver of RL1 in Gun Barrel. Is that, I'm looking at the zoning map.
Right.
Yeah, it's just south
Okay.
of yes, is it? No, it's not Spine. It's
Oh, because it doesn't overlap with the bus? I see what you're saying. So it's not.
Yeah, there's that little
yeah,
bit
that's
in
right.
the bottom
It's just,
left.
that's right. In the materials, you can see it's just a small sliver.
Okay. And did the survey we sent out, did it talk about this option? Specifically about the transit one?
Yes.
Okay. All right. And then when we think about the whole wildfire and permeable land in some of the areas like Lehigh Road or up the Boulder Canyon, whichever part that is, do we need to think about treating those areas any differently if they're near a flood conveyance zone?
I know that the map does show that. That's just because those are the streets that are eligible. Though some of those areas that are shown on there are actually in the county. So it's just the areas that are highlighted with the RL1 zone and RR zones.
Right, but like the Lehigh in South Boulder, would we treat that differently because of the fire danger there, or?
We're not proposing to treat
You're not
that differently.
Okay. Okay. Let me think about that for a sec.
Other questions? What did he say? We're not proposing not proposing any changes to certain areas based on their potential wildfire risk that might or might not be present.
I guess I just wanted to point out from the enlarged map on the Shanahan Ridge area that a lot of like my neighborhood, which is already quite dense, but is a PUD and is zoned different. Like a lot of the edge is actually zoned differently and isn't RL1.
Or is it zoned RL1 but subject to a PUD that wouldn't allow the kind of same kinds of development
I
standards?
think it's actually zoned differently, but I can't remember entirely off the top of my head.
Okay. I'm not seeing any other questions. So in terms of feedback, I'll just call on myself here and say I think the staff recommendation is going in the right direction. And I know we've had some... We've had a lot of communications in support, but also concerned about this one. And just a couple points, like someone in open comment was talking about the potential loss of open space areas or wetlands and things like that. But as we've reiterated a few times, the buildings can't be any bigger. They just would be allowed to potentially have 2 units instead of 1 unit in the same footprint. And just also the point that this was made in the memo that I thought was good is that the character of these neighborhoods have been changing gradually over time with the scrapes of older homes and rebuilding and building of very large single family homes to replace them. So it's not that these areas have been frozen in time and had no change, but instead the change is going just in the direction of one very large and then very expensive house. So this seems like a modest movement forward. And I do think it's modest because to Lauren's question, we enabled duplexes and triplexes on larger lots by right a while back, and we've so far gotten 1 permit filed for that. So I think we would be looking at a pace of change that would be modest here, but it would be targeted in those areas where you can walk to a bus line. So it feels to me like a good incremental step in terms of allowing more middle housing types, smaller units, They're not, wouldn't necessarily be cheap, but cheaper than the very large homes that we're seeing built now. So I'm supportive of this as a small incremental step as we move towards the comprehensive plan update. Yeah.
Wasn't one of the reasons why we only had one duplex because you needed 14,000 square feet, or was I misunderstanding that?
Yeah, under current regulations, a duplex would have to have 14,000 in the RL1 and it would have to have 60,000 in the RR.
That's a lot.
It only applies to larger lots, but there's still quite a lot of those large lots.
1,200 of those lots.
Other thoughts or?
Yeah, I think my biggest concern, and one that I've heard in my community, and it's actually, there's a lot of interest in duplexes and a lot of support. There's not a lot of interest in converting the properties to rentals through investors. And that's been really consistent. And I think there is a hope that there's a way we can do this through incentives or types of taxes or any kind of structure where we're expanding ownership opportunities and not really investment opportunities. So if there's a way to get that balance so that I think it would be great to have these options, but I wouldn't want to see us increase the number of rental units. We're already at 53%, and I could see that being one outcome of this change. But I don't know what we've seen in other communities that have done this, if they've seen an increase in rentals or if they've maintained the home ownership element organically without any kind of intervention through the city. And if you can speak to that, that'd be great.
Yeah, I mean, I actually did try to reach out to a number of communities. Unfortunately, they've not responded. There's a number of communities in California that have done things of this nature, but they've not responded.
Mark?
Yeah, this one is frankly a bridge too far for me. Reducing lot size from minimum of 7,000 to a minimum of 5,000, I thought was reasonable, and the increase in the RL1 zone would be 19%. Reducing it down to 4,000 square feet, potentially a densification equal to 39%. And that is contrary to a couple of things. One, it is contrary to the results of the community outreach that we did. And the results on that were pretty clear. And I don't think we can continue to do community outreach and then simply dismiss it by saying, well, it's not statistically valid. This was 375 responses, and it was pretty clear people were unhappy with what we were proposing. And you know, if we're not going to give weight to that, then let's not bother with the community outreach. In addition, by the language of staff itself, the RL1 zone is considered an established zone, and you know, quoting your own memo, that you've been cautious about proposing wholesale changes to the low density areas of the city without a broader community engagement process associated with a comprehensive planning update. Staff believes that the BVC update would be the best approach to engaging the community on changes that may impact the intensity and character of the RL1 and RR neighborhoods. By the way, I don't have a problem with staff's recommendations for the RR, given the size of the lots. But that wording cannot possibly be consistent with the proposal to increase the density of the RL1 zones by 39%. I'm sorry, that's just not, that's not how language works. And that's not what words are supposed to mean something. And if you mean what you say in the staff memo, it is simply inconsistent with a more aggressive approach on the RL1 to go from a 19% increase to 39% increase, and to ignore substantial community outreach and the results thereof that indicate that this is a very unpopular concept. The will of council may simply say, we don't care, we want to do it anyway, but I think a more moderate approach should be taken, and this should be discussed again in terms of the DVCP update. This is way too aggressive for my taste, and it's only on the RL1 that I'm making this. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Mark. Carl, can you clarify there? I think previously you had a slide that said with the 350 feet width, how many units that would allow?
Oh, the 350, it's that 4,325. We took that increase and we spread that throughout the city. So that's what gave us that 350 feet.
So, but there, a couple slides later, I think you address it directly. There was that 40%, right? So similar to that 39%.
Yep.
And so, Mark, I got a couple other people who want to speak, but did you want to propose a different buffer zone around bus zones, around bus routes that would result in a smaller number of allowed units?
I would look to the buffer zone based upon a reduction in lot size to 5,000 square feet rather than 4,000 square feet.
So
I think one is a more reasonable approach to adding units to the RL1 zone than the other. And before we do that, we ought to have very substantial community outreach, assuming we're simply going to ignore the community outreach that we've already done, but we don't find satisfactory because it disagrees with our conclusion.
Got it. Thanks for that. All right, I got Ryan and Lauren queued up. I think Ryan also has a colloquy. Okay, go ahead.
Mark, I just wanted to clarify what you said, because there's kind of two different ways we're looking at determining lots that could have duplexes. One is by the actual lot size, and the other is by the lot location. And so you're saying that you would prefer us to do it by the lot size and not by the lot location. Is that true?
Well, I think we could do both. If we reduce it to 5,000 square feet, that implies a certain number of parcels eligible for duplexes. And if we want to spread those out on the transit corridors, it might make those corridors a little narrower and less intrusive into the surrounding residential neighborhoods.
So, Mark, maybe what I'm hearing from you then is a desire to have a buffer zone around bus corridors of the amount that would result in an increase of 19% in additional units.
Precisely.
Okay. So we're not sure exactly how many feet that would be, but whatever feet would result in 19% additional units.
200, 300, 400, whatever it ends up as.
Okay, Ryan, did you want to speak to this?
Thank you. I have three things. The first two are replies to things colleagues have said. On the BVCP, I'm glad Mark raised it, and I think it's really important that we are being deferential to the current BVCP and respectful of the process ahead of us. And I understand that we're within that. By definition, the things that we're talking about as have been analyzed for whether they'll get outside of those bounds. So my read on our current place vis-a-vis the BVCP is the BVCP. What's the word? I don't know if it encourages, but it certainly opens the door to what we're contemplating. So that's the first thing. Second thing, I agree with Tina on being concerned about the current and future market for short-term rentals and what that does to housing displacement. This is such an important issue that HOAs are taking it up, and they don't have the power and they don't have the process that we do. And so I do think this is something we should look at more seriously as we go alongside the building itself. Okay, and then my third point, and this was my primary point, I do support the proposal, and I'm just thinking about how if you have a 4,000 square foot house, a big house in one of these whatever locations, turn that into 2,000 square foot houses, that's great for families, however you define families. That's great for more people to have transit ridership, and basically in general to create more economies of scale to get more for less with our shared infrastructure. Also, on a more traditional, perhaps, sort of picture of a family, I have two small kids, and every time another family with small kids moves in within a half a mile, it's a blessing. And families, with small kids, I can't speak for all of us, but we tend to like other small kids, and this is it's a blessing when we make this happen. So as a parent in one of these districts, I think this is very exciting. And then yeah, I think I'll leave it at that. Thanks.
Great. Lauren, did you have something else to add? Yeah, go ahead. And
Thanks. So yeah, I really appreciate these great maps and the staff's recommendation for this targeted approach focusing on our more transit rich environments. I don't think this is a wholesale change. I find that this to me feels very in line with the BBCP in terms of keeping the majority of these zones single family, but still allowing for reasonable a diversity of housing types and helping us move away from car dependency. I agree with what Tina brought up in terms of I think it's important for us to look at ways we can disincentivize investor ownership and try and preserve the ability for owner occupancy in these areas. And I don't know that our next item is the way to do that, but I do want us to continue looking at that. I also, in terms of looking at how this could, at one point we talked about an inclusionary housing fee for additional square footage, and I also look forward to that piece coming back to us. I believe it does at some point. I can't remember where that is, but just various ways to try and make sure that the new housing or any density that is added, one, that we're allowing this duplexing instead of just mega mansions, but also if there is additional square footage that we are using that to help our affordable housing overall. Yeah, thanks.
thanks, Nicole.
Yeah. So just a couple of comments. One is, I think this may be the place to mention it. I really would prefer not to do convenience surveys if that's our only real form of engagement and outreach that we're doing. It isn't sufficient for me to consider that outreach. When the samples that we're getting are very different from our population. And just looking at the demographics of the survey respondents who responded, we only had it wasn't even quite 11% renters who responded to that. The number of people making under $100,000 a year, which is about the area median income, was 20%. Half of the people were over 35, with the bulk even over 55. So I think that, you know, we get feedback from the folks who have the time and ability and the know-how to email us or, you know, come and speak at the public hearing. But I think we lead ourselves into a trap where we are focused on this as if it aligns with the engagement that we're doing in other areas that are more thorough, like with the Boulder Valley Comprehensive Plan, that are more inclusive of the many different people within our community. I really don't. I don't want to leave people out, and when we're referring to this as outreach, technically it is, but it shouldn't be the whole thing that we're doing. And just generally agree with Lauren. The 350-foot proposal aligns with the Boulder Valley Comprehensive Plan, and that I really don't see this being a huge change in the coming decades. I think it will be incremental, it will be slow, and lifting up Tina's comments and Lauren's plus one about how we finding other ways to incentivize affordability. And I think that some of our long-term financial strategy discussions are a great place for us to be doing that, given that we've already talked about some options there for how we can prevent private or kind of investment ownership in some of the new properties and things. So thank you.
Thanks, Taisha.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Excuse me. I agree with Mayor Pro Tem Spears' comments about our qualitative information gathering. And in the interim, if there is interest to continue to use statistically invalid survey methods, I would strongly recommend a limitation section that just outlines and recognizes where there may be underrepresentation or overrepresentation. More so, I mean, in addition, it will be helpful for us, but also for all of those who are reading the packet. So I just, again, want to lift up in the interim that one mechanism is to include the limitations section. And then just in general, wanting to lift up the need for a deeper collaboration between water and energy use and housing and planning. I can give that there may be similar water use as it relates to their, not using so much for lawns, and there would be using it for people. I can accept that, but to generate energy also takes water. And having more people definitely increases energy demand. I am all for density, but I would love us to make sure that we are keeping an eye on energy, water, and habitat. Thank you.
Thanks. All right, I don't see any other hands raised. I'd like to straw poll Mark's proposal. So the staff recommendation is a buffer zone of 350 feet around bus corridors where duplexes would be allowed. And Mark's proposal is to instead have a buffer zone that would allow for a 19% increase in the number of units. And the back of the envelope map says that might be around 150 feet, but staff would need to do that calculation. Tina.
Can I amend his proposal or no? 'Cause I don't think...
You could suggest something different if you'd like, but you should turn your microphone off.
Sorry. I want to propose, so in my ideal world, we would have some tools to promote affordability and ownership and dissuade this as an investment vehicle at the same time that we make the ordinance. I would like those things to happen simultaneously. I'm concerned about, we don't have our long-term financial strategies meeting until Q2. I think it's going to be in April of next year. And I'm less excited to pass the ordinance without having that in place. And I'm alternatively open to doing this change through the BVCP, where we would have statistically valid surveys if we don't feel that we've really done engagement on this that has any meaning.
So, Tina, what I might do is take that as a separate proposal that I'll check on. So, as I understood, your proposal is that you would want measures in place to assure affordability and, say that again.
Encourage.
And encourage ownership?
Yeah. Encourage both. I can't assure.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you'd like measures in place to encourage affordability and ownership simultaneously with the passage of this ordinance. Yeah, go ahead and ask a question.
I just have a staff question in relation to what Tina just mentioned. I know there's no exact science and you do not have a crystal ball, so I want to start with that. If you were to envision when people in the neighborhoods in these areas would start seeing noticeable changes, noticeable increases in, the number of people there, houses, single family homes being converted to duplexes, how far out would you sort of estimate that? Understanding it is an estimate, but based on your professional expertise.
I mean, we've discussed it internally. It'd be years to decades is kind of our thinking on it.
Yep. Okay. So it's not like things would change within a year or two if we were working on these other things too. So they sort of making the change, and then as you know, we're waiting the decades for things to happen. That's a time when we could be working on some of the other affordability constraints. Okay, thank you.
And I'll just call myself a teen just to respond to your proposal. I'm definitely interested in exploring those things, but we're so much further along with these very specific proposals than the more kind of general, what would we do to incentivize affordability and ownership, that I would like to pursue those things, but I wouldn't make this effort contingent on those things. So that's just my personal thinking on it, but happy to straw poll the proposal. So, yep. Go ahead, Tara.
I think 19%, was that 19% that Mark said? Was that what he said?
19%.
Okay, so I'm, of course, always looking for the middle ground. And so I was wondering, I know I don't have the votes, but if my perfect world would be to do a slower measured change so that the community comes along with us versus gets aggravated and starts screaming. So I'm going to suggest 300 feet. So just taking it down a little bit for no other reason other than trying to get community to go with us.
All right. I've got a 300 feet. I got a 300 feet. You have a 250 feet. 250 feet.
Could I ask? Can I ask a question? When we say 350 feet, how many blocks is that?
I mean, it
Could we put it
depends
into
on the
blocks?
part of
Kinda?
the city. I think
Yeah.
that's kind of like a standard block, a little bit more than a standard block.
Which is about a block.
I think it's like around 200 feet to 250 feet is about a block.
And Nicole's got a comment, and then I'm going to do a whole bunch of straw polling for all this stuff we've been talking about. Nope. I mean, a block varies, but you're saying 200, 250 feet, maybe something like that. All right, I'm going to start with Tina's in case the results of that changes anybody else's minds. So Tina's proposal is that we not pass an ordinance around this until we have also included the measures to encourage affordability and ownership. All in favor of tying those two together 100%? Raise your hand. I got two hands. Okay. Okay. So there were two votes for that, so not majority support on that one. Better than my last one. Okay. Now I think I'm going to go to Mark's, and if Mark's is unsuccessful, I'm going to go to yours. Okay, Tara. So Mark's proposal was to reduce the buffer amount so that it would result in an increase of 19% allowed units, maybe around 150 feet. Staff would have to do the calculation. Raise your hand if you're in favor of that. I got one on that one. And then Tara, you got 300 feet. Tara's proposal is 300 feet instead of the staff recommendation of 350 feet. So all in favor of a 300 feet buffer instead of a 350 feet buffer, raise your hand. All right, I got two. So yay, Mark did as well. So by process of elimination, I think we've ended back on the staff recommendation to proceed forward with.
Great, thank you.
Teresa, did you want
Maybe
me
we
to,
could still poll that?
I could still straw poll that. Yeah.
Yeah, if
Let's do
I'm
that.
counting votes correctly, I'm still not seeing a majority yet.
Okay, let's give it a try. All right, thanks. And you're right, I should be straw polling that. That's an excellent point. All in favor of moving forward with the staff recommendation, raise your hand. 3, 4, 5. I got 5. Oh, 6. We got 6. Okay, glad we clarified that. Thank you. All right, well, moving on. And I'll note that we're at time for the item in the meeting, so maybe we can move through the last two fairly quickly.
Okay, so suggestion 4 relates to the owner occupancy piece. So our analysis is pretty similar to what we had presented in April. We certainly understand the concerns about investment properties, and we've already been hearing that in the discussion tonight. As far as our job as staff is to make recommendations based on how something meets the project goals or not. I'd say based on meeting the project goals, we're recommending against the owner occupancy piece, just based on the fact that that would be a pretty big barrier to people adding units. There's also the concern about staffing on this one, because monitoring owner occupancy on a very large part of the city would actually probably necessitate additional staff having to be hired to monitor this. So it does cause some concern there. That said, we do understand the concern and don't disagree that maybe there are other methods to discourage investor properties from propagating as a result of this change. Council previously had requested that we move forward with this particular option to get community feedback, and as we talked about, there was quite a bit of support for it. When we went to planning board with this, they unanimously did not support the owner occupancy requirement because it would be a disincentive to creating new housing, and that it does create pretty significant administrative challenges within our department. They did again acknowledge the concern as you are tonight, and did want to look at maybe other methods to deal with this other than zoning. So that brings us back to the staff recommendation of not recommending owner occupancy through zoning at this time. Look at other methods.
Thanks, Carl. Clarifying questions for Carl? Yeah, Lauren?
Partially because I want to bring this to light, but so if a person who owned a property and built a duplex then relocated but still owned the property, what would they be required to do in order to meet an owner occupancy requirement? Because the unit would already be built.
We're not entirely sure about that. It's kind of a difficult thing. We do something similar to this now with an ADU, where there's a declaration of use that gets recorded with the property. So it basically requires at least one person who owns the property to live on the property. So I think it would be something along the lines of that.
And I know with an ADU, you typically have to, if you can't comply with it, you have to like remove what makes it a dwelling unit, typically. And so it just seems like that would potentially lead us to a strange place where we would have a second housing unit that would be not have a kitchen or a showering facility and sitting potentially vacant. And the unintended consequences seem difficult to deal with.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Great point. Not seeing any other questions, so we have a staff recommendation of not requiring owner occupancy. Does anyone disagree with that recommendation, wants to speak to a difference? I am seeing no hands raised. So looks like we got agreement with you all to not move forward with an owner occupancy requirement.
Okay. All right, and then the last suggestion relates to exempting out projects that are 100% permanently affordable from the site review process to encourage more affordable units, to streamline the review for those projects. And in lieu of that, have them go through an administrative review for design review that's reviewed with our housing department that has a lot of qualitative criteria that are similar to site review. So council was in support of this last time we discussed it. So we've moved forward with this proposal. We just want to make clear that this would be a 100% permanently affordable project that does not require like a height bonus or a height modification. We're not recommending that, since that would require site review, to get planning board approval, and it also for the community benefit requirements that apply to those projects. We wouldn't want to lose that. When we took this to planning board, there was the reception on the topic was mixed. There was concern that these projects that generally would benefit from comments from planning board, either through concept plan or through site review, would be lost. So there was more mixed reception on this topic, not a lot of support that we sensed from planning board on exempting them out from site review. We're continuing to recommend that we think that there's a mechanism to qualitatively review these projects through the design review process, and we'll stand by that.
Great. Questions for staff on this one? Tara?
Well, I'm not really sure what are the cons. Why would planning board feel this way, can you give us the list of cons that you think for us to, in other words, say that we don't want to do this?
Part of it is I think they wanted to get more information about whether it was what was the benefit to the city by doing this, and what's the benefit to BHP. I think we didn't have a clear understanding of what BHP thought at that time. We've since followed up with BHP, and they've indicated to us that they would be supportive of not having to go through like the call up process or having a planning board hearing, because there would be some savings of time by not going to planning board. A lot of the expenses still going to be there because they'd have to produce materials that are analogous to a site review. But BHP did express support when we talked to them about it.
My only concern would be like design element, because we have such pretty designs right now in our BHP properties and so you're saying though that I don't need to worry about that.
I mean, again, a lot of the criteria that apply through the design review is very similar to site review. It's not exactly the same. Part of our thinking is we've already been doing this for certain projects, like off-site projects. So there's been several years of this going on. It's just, it would put all of the affordable projects, except for the ones, at 4 or 5 stories, into that process.
Tina, Ryan.
You can colloquy.
I think this is an appropriate sequence. But Tara, I wanted to just mention, I did talk to one of the planning board members who had concerns about this, and the part of the thinking from at least one planning board member that had concerns about this is that some of the compliments you just paid to recent work is in the city is in part coming from innovations, improvements that the planning board has made in the way that it gives guidance on site design and placemaking. And so that was a perspective I heard, and I think it's a good perspective, and I'd like to acknowledge it. I think I'm still probably going to go with the staff proposal, but I think it's not easy, but yeah.
Do we give is there anything else that we can give affordable developments? I mean, do they have to pay permit fees if they do 100% affordable? Or?
They do, but I think there's some subsidies from housing that go for those projects. Am I saying that wrong?
I mean, I can speak to that. We charge them all the same fees.
Yeah.
But the city's affordable housing fund is usually kicking in a large quantity of money to enable those projects.
Yeah, and then there's also going to be the expedited review that is going to apply in the next few years too.
I mean,
and a version of it already exists. But the affordable is the only type of land use review that we put at the top of the list right now, and then, as Carl's alluding to, the state requirement is coming up too.
Okay. So we do expedite them anyway?
Yeah.
Okay. And I mean, I think any incentives would be great. I wouldn't want to limit ourselves to that.
Taisha and then Lauren.
Can you speak more to the concerns that were lifted by the Center for People with Disabilities? And you mentioned that there were workarounds to ensure that the housing, that it 100% permanent supportive housing, that there are other mechanisms and strategies to ensure that we're not only meeting ADA, but we're exceeding ADA.
Yeah,
Thank you.
that part of the memo was part of the analysis that we had sent council in April. And that was more on the topic of whether we should incentivize missing middle projects, not permanently affordable projects, by exempting them out of site review. So we were asked by one council member to talk to the Center for People with Disabilities to see if they felt that that was a housing type that should be incentivized in that manner. And there was some concern that some of those housing types may not be the greatest for ADA accessibility, and therefore we already are incentivizing it through a number of other things that we've talked about tonight, that maybe we shouldn't do it through site review. So that's how it evolved to, let's look at just permanently affordable projects. Let's incentivize that by exempting it out.
Thank you.
I really like the direction of this. I'm someone who, I think our permanently affordable projects face a lot of challenges with funding, and risk always adds substantially to that. And so when you go through a site review process, you're increasing risk. I do, however, also get where planning board is coming from, and I think there might be a size threshold here that potentially projects that, where you're talking about multiple buildings and a big site that has a lot more things that you might need to adjust around how it's interfacing with other transportation systems and community space and all of that. I think for those much larger projects where they can also spread the risk and the cost of that risk out over more units, I think it still makes sense for them to go through a site review process. So I think and I don't know what that number is. I'm hoping you can recommend something for us, but to me, there is a limit to where I feel comfortable with exempting 100% affordable projects.
So it sounds like we're getting into comments here.
Oh,
sorry. I haven't seen any other questions. So I think we're in the comments phase now. Lauren's got an idea of only doing this for projects up to a certain size. And I said Tara and then Mark are interested in saying something about that.
Yeah, I agree with that. First of all, not all permanently affordable, not all PSH developers are fashion forward, should I say. Some of them aren't as, their properties aren't as pretty. So I think that because it's such a large mass that we're talking about with some of these, that I agree with Lauren that we should do that. I agree with you, Lauren. Can we
And
call that the Weiner-Folkert Amendment or what?
And just to clarify, we're talking about permanently affordable, not permanent supportive housing. So not PSH, but permanently affordable. Mark.
Yeah, I'm going to go with the staff recommendation on this. Look, in development, time is money, and we want our housing authority to be able to develop at the least possible cost, and being able to avoid a site review has a direct monetary consequence to BHP. And if you've taken a tour of their properties, they're very well designed. I don't think they, this is not an agency that just ignores the fundamentals of design to do whatever they want, but accelerating their development process by whether it's a few weeks or a couple of months is an important is important to them, and will enable them to save a substantial amount of money as they bring these projects along. So I'm going to go with the staff recommendation on this. I think it's we have an extremely responsible housing authority, and I'd like to be supportive of their efforts.
Thanks, Mark. Nicole, and then I'll call on myself.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with Mark on this one. Tina, you brought up the DRCOG study a little bit earlier in talking about how, the bulk of what we're going to need is permanently affordable or affordable housing in the coming decades. And so I do support the staff recommendation here. I think even just a little bit of extra speed is going to make a difference when we're trying to just reconcile the deep need we have for more affordable housing in the community. And I would be willing to sacrifice I may get stuff thrown at me at the next meeting, but I would be willing to sacrifice a little bit of control over the design in order to get a slightly faster build on these permanently affordable projects.
Yeah, I'll chime in and agree with Mark and Nicole here on this one. I think most of our 100% permanently affordable developments, by far the most, are from Boulder Housing Partners. And Mark, appreciate your service as our council liaison to BHP. And so you know very well how incredibly well they work and the high quality of the projects that they produce. And also it's an incentive, so it'll save some time and some money for these projects, but also it would be an incentive. A developer might look at a project and be like, I think I could make 100% affordable work. And you know what? If I do that, I remove the risk from the project and move through more quickly. And so my hope would be we'd get an occasional extra one with this incentive as well. Any other comments on this before we go to a straw poll? Seeing none, Lauren has a proposal to only exempt certain projects of smaller size from the site review process, and larger ones would still be subject to the threshold TBD. All in favor of that, please raise your hand. I got 3. Then how about all in favor of the staff recommendation to exempt all permanently affordable? All right. So after the amendment failed, everybody's still in favor of the staff recommendation. So appreciate you bringing that forward. I was very excited to see this, by the way. I've always wanted to do something like this. So when I saw that recommendation, I really appreciated it coming forward.
All right.
Do you need anything else from us?
Just have the conclusion. So as we've noted throughout the presentation, we find that these recommendations from staff are consistent with the goals set out for the project. If you add all the things up through all the changes, this would add the potential for 7,500 housing units, again, over the long term. We're talking years and decades like we were talking about. Other changes that go beyond the BVCP would be considered as part of phase 2 of this project. So that's looking at other opportunities for missing middle, looking at other housing types like townhouses, cottage courts, things like that, and maybe other areas for housing throughout the city. But it's also looking at limited mixed use, maybe in potential areas along corridors to add to 15-minute neighborhood goals, and exploring with the community what the appetite is for those. And then as far as next steps, we're going to move forward with drafting the ordinance. Our goal is to get it to and through the process by February 2025. We are looking to do office hours to get more input on the actual technical language in the ordinances. This is our tentative schedule. I think since a lot of these changes aren't deviating too much from the recommendation, I think we can try to hold to them. Right now we have a November date for planning board, housing advisory board on November 20th, and then we would be coming back to council for first reading on December 19th, and then second reading on January 9th. That's the current schedule we have.
Yeah, Tina.
Which reading would be the public hearing?
The second reading on January 9th.
Okay.
Great. Well, I guess that wraps us up. Carl, I just want to express an immense amount of gratitude to your extraordinary work on this. You're sitting there all by yourself and all this incredibly technical stuff, and just the analysis and the explanation is truly remarkable.
Well, I do get a lot of help from people behind me on the mapping and data and all that too, but thank you.
Right. And thanks to other planning department staff for being here tonight as well and supporting. All right. That brings us to the end of our agenda. Any final thoughts before our gavel is closed? Not seeing any. I'll close out the meeting at 9:32 p.m. Thanks, everybody.
You all in 2 weeks.
See you, Mark.